Okay, we will make a start. I think people will still be filtering through over the next few minutes, I'm sure. But good morning, everyone, and welcome to the International Doctors Welcome event. My name is Amina Hussein, and I'm the RCGP Clinical Lead for International Medical Graduate GP Registrars. I'm also a training program director, an educator on the East Midlands New to NHS program, a GP partner, an equality, diversity, and inclusion lead for my local RCGP faculty, and a coach, and a couple of other things. Um, but before I was all of these people, I was a 6-year-old girl arriving in the UK from Pakistan with my IMG father, much like many of you who may have come here with your own families. I grew up in a household where uncertainty around visas and professional exams was an understood norm. Navigating cultural and language differences was day to day. Navigating a new schooling system, healthcare system, dealing with racism and discrimination, and feeling like we always needed a backup plan were all just part and parcel of the multifaceted life of an IMG family. I'm now the only UK graduate in a family with an IMG parent and two IMG sisters. So, in many ways, I've spent much of my life acting as a bridge between different systems, cultures, and experiences. So, it's my aim and the aim of the college today to now be that bridge for you, to help make the system easier to understand, for support to be easier to find, and your experiences to be heard and represented where it matters. So today's event has been designed to support you with some of these things, and we hope that by the end of the session, you feel more informed, more connected, and more welcome as well. So before we begin, I'll briefly cover some housekeeping. Today's session is being recorded, and we're planning to make the recording available on YouTube within 2 weeks after the event. So you'll always be able to look back on it. We recognize that there's lots of information to take today, so don't feel that you have to make lots of notes or remember everything immediately. You'll be able to go and recap it later. Please could you all check that your Zoom name displays your actual first name and surname, because this helps us to identify who everyone is accurately and allows us to communicate with you more easily during the session as well. You can submit questions using the Q&A function at any point through the webinar. That's a little box that appears on the bottom panel, and it says Q&A underneath it. You don't need to wait until the formal Q&A session, which we will have at the end of the webinar at 1:30, but you can ask throughout if you wish. There should also be an option to submit your question anonymously by selecting the anonymous checkbox when you go on the Q&A section. So feel free to use this if you would like. We might not be able to answer all of your individual questions if they're really specific, but we'll try and identify the key themes and provide signposting for more detailed information if we can as well. So I will now take you through today's program so that you know what to expect. We'll begin with, well, right now it's me, so see that little introduction, that's me. And then we'll begin with the college and the different communities within it. You'll hear about the role of the college across the 4 nations of the UK and about local faculties. You'll be introduced to the IMG Special Interest Group and also meet some of your national GP registrar representatives as well. At 10:55, we'll move to a session on neurodivergence. This will explore how neurodivergence could affect learning, communication, and support during training. After the first break, we'll introduce some of the organisations that can support you during GP training as well. Then we'll have the MDU. They're an indemnity organisation, and they'll lead a session exploring some of the professional and medical legal issues that doctors might have in the UK. After the second break, then, we'll bring together the main take-home messages from the personal journey of one of our IMG GPs, and we'll finish with a longer question and answer session at that point before closing. Okay, so I've introduced myself and the session, so let's talk a little bit about the RCGP, the Royal College of GPs, which I'll probably just call the college from here on out. It is the professional membership organisation for GPs in the UK. Many of you will know the college because of its role in the GP training, but also for MRCGP exams. But the college does do more than just organise your exams. It also represents GPs and GP registrars, which means it listens to the profession and it raises important issues where needed, such as in the news, in the media, or to the government as well. The college also provides learning, guidance, and online resources. These can support you during training when you're preparing for exams, but also to fill any knowledge gaps and later on in your career as well. After completing the MRCGP, you might choose to attend a membership ceremony. This is a formal event to celebrate becoming a member of the college, sort of like a graduation or a convocation ceremony, and they host those across the country for you as well. The college can also support your leadership and your career development journey. So there's opportunities within the college to lead on projects, committees, events, lead professional networks, all of those sort of things as well. It's also a good place to build connections through your local faculties, which we'll be talking about, national groups, college events, where you can meet other GP registrars and GPs from different parts of the UK with similar or different interests. So I would encourage you not to see the college only as an organisation that's responsible for your exams. It can also be your professional home, your community, and a place where you can take part and have a voice. In terms of resources, the college website has a lot of useful information which you can use throughout your training. A good place to start is a new page which is being launched later today, which you'll be able to access by the end of the webinar, and we will share a link to that, called Starting Out in the UK. This is a new hub that's being created for international doctors specifically who are beginning work in GP training or in the UK, and it signposts to a lot of the resources that you might want depending on different topic areas. So you'll be able to use that to navigate the website. But you can also find in other areas of the website your information and support for GP exams, courses and events, which can be online or in person, and most of which are free for members. And there's also wellbeing and support resources for you as well. And you can use the website to find your local RCGP branch, which is basically your faculty. That's what those are called, and their contact details. So lots of things on the website for that. Perfect. So now we'll hear about your place in the college, Four Nations and local faculties, where we'll be joined by Dr. Amir Gangro, Dr. Anita Ejiofor, Dr. Kamran Naseem, and Dr. Samson Ogunlarian. They either are or have all served as representatives on their local faculty boards, and they'll be telling us a bit more about their local faculties and their journeys. So we'll start with Dr. Gangro, who is a fellow of the RCGP. He's a GP partner in Cardiff and also in London, and he's a passionate leader in primary care with a special interest in diabetes. He serves as vice chair of BroTAF LMC, local medical committee, GMS collaboration lead, and MDT lead for the Southwest cluster in Cardiff. So over to you, Dr. Gangro.
Thank you, Amina. Good morning, everybody. So it's an honor to speak to all the people who have joined, especially the newer GPs, colleagues who have joined the the profession. And can I have my presentation? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Amin's already introduced me, so I don't need to tell me who I am again. So I'll just focus quickly on the Wales structure. Wales itself is a big deanery in itself. It's a country as well. It's a deanery as well. And within our deanery, there are three faculties of RCGP. So there's a Southeast Wales faculty, there's a Southwest Wales faculty, and North Wales faculty. The core structure of each faculty is similar, which is kind of a standard for all the faculties in UK. I want to focus more on the representative roles. These are not very specific to each faculty, and each faculty decides their own representative roles. For example, if there's a need for a medical school representative, they would develop one. Um, so IMG representative is a relatively new role in Wales, and it I was the first IMG representative myself in my faculty. I'm not the IMG rep anymore because one of my other colleagues, Dr. Patafi, has taken over. Then there's a equality and diversity inclusion lead as well. Yeah, next slide, please. So what we do, we obviously the faculties represent the GPs within the area. So if you live or work in the area, that's how you are represented in the faculty. So we do arrange education events like CPD events, courses, and conferences. There are networking events as well. Uh, we try to do some kind of social events where we have got like we network as well and kind of enjoy the evening, get to know the people. The important role of the faculties is to actually influence and shape and the national primary care priorities. So there's a big example is in Wales we've got a deep end project. If you've heard about it, it's about supporting the practices which are in the deprived areas, and also we also support the career development as well. Um, the biggest thing for me in the faculty is the leadership opportunity you get. um, I actually joined the college quite late myself in my career, and then I did my fellowship while I was on the. So it kind of encouraged you to take more and more roles as you go on. But key is to get involved earlier. Faculties are the local engine of RCGP. So think about like a pyramid scheme. So you're at the base, and then everything is getting fed up to the top, and that's how your voice becomes the policy. Next slide, please. So to get involved, so you need to know which faculty you belong to, and you should contact them. You should attend the local CPD networking events. You try to meet more and more faculty members and understand the opportunities which are available there. I'll share some contacts as well in the end, which you can actually contact your local faculty and then. So I think the first opportunity is trying to get onto the board as an observer, see what opportunities you've got. It's a real opportunity to become a leader. And when you start as a rep role, and then you kind of have some kind of innovative ideas of arranging some kind of networking sessions, you present it to the board, and you learn from senior members on the board as well who have been there for like more than 20, 30 years, some of them, and it's a great opportunity to become a leader. One thing I've learned is that our curriculum during our training does not cover everything. The real world practice uh, actually is the real training and teaching we do and we learn, because the leadership comes from there. For example, being a partner, a lot of questions come to me about partnership, how the partnership finances work and things, and this is the areas where your local faculties can be very useful as well, because you will find your network in those faculties. Uh, so there are different roles, as I said, about the rep roles. Try and uh, you know go to your local meetings, and you don't need to be a board member to attend a board meeting. You can actually just ask your local faculty coordinator when is the next meeting you would like to attend, and just go and observe one or two meetings, and then you start contributing. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the being proactive, faculties welcome motivated new GPs, and opportunities are often informal. So you don't need to wait for an advertisement to come out by email. So just kind of be proactive and try and engage more with your faculties, and hopefully the opportunities will come itself. Next slide, please. So these are the contacts which are in north, south, east, north faculty, southeast faculty, and southwest faculties. You can contact them or email them and get the details of the next board meetings and events coming up. And try and get involved early, as I said, is the key. Thank you, Amina. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. And we will have questions answered in the Q&A section. So if you have any questions for Dr. Gangro from the Wales faculty, please put your questions in the chat and he will be happy to answer some of those for you there. So I'd like to move on to Dr. Ejiofor, who is an SD3 registrar working at the Northern Ireland Medical and Dental Training Agency, and she's the immediate past IMG representative for the RCGP Northern Ireland faculty. So if I can pass on to you, Dr. Ejiofor.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Anita, and I'll be speaking on the RCGP, which is the council in Northern Ireland. It's quite similar to what you have in Wales, but so the council would consist of reps from the three, so there are about 5 trust areas across Northern Ireland. So we would have 3 reps from each of them, and then there would also be additional members from focus areas like the IMG rep, the sessional, and all. And so we'll typically have meetings about 4 times a year, which is a mix of virtual and in person. And really, what the council does is to support members, across different stages of their careers, debates, with key policies, and make sure that views of GPs are heard. So that's really what the college would do. And in terms of how you can get involved in your local council here in Northern Ireland, next slide, please. Yeah. So there are meetings that are organized across the year, which could be, social events and educational events, and it provides a good opportunity for you to meet, other GPs or even registrars, and network with people, and then just volunteering or just putting yourself out there. I had nominated myself for the IMG rep because it was vacant, because it provided an opportunity for me to learn more about the college, and just to see what the college is doing, get more involved, and build my leadership skills while I'm at it. And how you would get support through your journey as a GP registrar, or even a GP. I find that although there are formal mentorship or like the buddy system, but most of the mentorship would happen informally, and just reaching out to people and asking for help. I would say maybe just speaking up a bit early does help. And then usually when people are posted to Northern Ireland, they would be told about like a WhatsApp or Facebook group for people who are new to Northern Ireland. So it would contain people who have been new at different points, and it provides quite helpful information. I would find that the main challenges that most people would face when they move to Northern Ireland would be the fact that it's the least diverse of the 4 nations, and so most times some people would move with limited or no social support. But even being a part of those maybe WhatsApp group, cultural groups, it allows you to ask questions, seek help, and get clarifications about things. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so these are the main things that most people would face. So the hospitals or the different trust areas could provide, like accommodation, and so reaching out quite early can be helpful. And yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Thank you very much. I can see that there is a question in the chat about how do I find my local faculty team. So how do you find out where your local faculty is? If one of the panelists can take that question. It's all right. Oh, I think, uh, Iman, have you unmuted there?
Can do, yeah. So, welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be speaking with you guys a bit later as well. So, it's quite helpful for you to know if you're, for example, on a training scheme. The first thing I would signpost people to is there's a really lovely page which is called the RCGP Faculties page. And when you go onto that page, you can literally see all of the different faculties across all of the UK. And you can try and figure out, okay, I live in this city. That means I'm part of this faculty. And when you click on the faculty, there's a really lovely get involved section. There's also a who are we section. And sometimes it can be really helpful if you look at the who are we just to see if there's a name, if there's a lead contact that you can maybe contact specifically, because maybe there's some contact details there. If not, what I would say is going on the get involved page, usually there's the contact details across there. Sometimes I tell people it's really helpful just to come and observe and just ask the questions because then you get an idea or a feel of what the faculty is all about. But we will come more to that when we
Right.
talk later.
Thanks, Aman. And I can see that Sophie has kindly put a link to that page you mentioned into the chat as well. Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Dr. Nassim, who is a salaried GP and GP lead in Walsall. He has clinical interest in joint injections, women's health and frailty, and he plays a key role in training as a GP trainer, appraiser, training program director, early career lead for Black Country ICB, and faculty education lead for the RCGP Midlands. So a man with many hats, Dr. Nassim.
Thanks, Amina. Thank you for introducing me. I'm not going to go over that again. I do quite a few things, but I am part of the English faculties, which is one of the biggest groups in RCGP. And it's so big that we're divided into 4 regions. So we have about 40,800-ish. I use the word ish because the number keeps changing. It's growing. We are divided in England in 4 regions. So you've got London and South England region, which has about 6 faculties, and there are over 13,000 members within this region. Then we've got North England region, which is made up of 7 faculties, and there are over 11,500 members in that region. There is Central and East England region, which has got 5 faculties, and there are over 11,000 members in that region. And I am part of the Central faculties, Midlands faculty. And then we've got Southwest England region and Thames Valley, which is about 4 faculties, has 5,300 members within its region. And Amir has already gone through, roughly what the board looks like, roughly what the faculty looks like. There is a big governance work that's been recently done, and that will standardize how the faculties are across each area. But they will still have, other than the structural head of provost and chair and vice president and all that structure, there will always be room for local representatives. So don't be shy if there is something that you feel that after attending the board you realize they're not working on a particular area. Feel free to reach out to your provost or other faculty board people, and they will go through it and see if that job can be created. There's a question, are we supposed to join the faculty meetings? No, it's not mandatory, but it is encouraged, because I know ST1 can be very daunting. You could be, really worried about what's going on, how to find your feet, but faculty gives you a soft landing. But if you're interested, you can start attending from, your first month of starting. And like we've said before, they give you the voice onto the key policies makers table, stakeholders, and they represent your views. And college is very important in shaping government policy, because that's who the government normally speaks to. They don't go and speak to your deanery directly. They don't go and speak to your BMA. They speak to the college, which provides them that insight and intelligence. Next slide, please. Well, like everyone said, I would say start. So if you're an SD1 and you're worried about where do I start, there's no need to panic. I know there's a lot of terms like RCGP, deanery, there is BMA, there is lead employer. So you'll figure out that there are quite a few stakeholders involved in your training. Start by just going to your VTS, talk to your colleagues who've been there, before, just try and see what their insight is. And they're usually very helpful. I mean, we all try and help each other get through this and start there. Then obviously start looking at faculty and deanery events, reach out to your local faculty. You don't, have to do it immediately. You can pace yourself, but also look at other events and meetings that are happening, like educational, social, not necessarily by the college. That does link into that. And like Anita said, do volunteer yourself. Look up for RCGP or local mentoring scheme, especially if you're struggling. Next slide, please. I'll quickly go through how I joined my faculty or how I became, part of it. So I, started as like yourself as an SD1, didn't know what was going on. I was constantly puzzled by what does RCGP do? What does faculty mean? What is called, deanery and all those different roles. So I started going to VTS, trying to figure out what happened. And by serendipity, I ended up on a school board meeting where I found that in our area in West Midlands, the pass rate for IMGs was 10% lower than the national average. And that didn't sit quite well with me. I was only an ST1 at that time, going into ST2, and I thought, you know what, that can't be right. We need to do something about it. And lo and behold, using that as motivation, I started talking to other people about it. Started talking to my TPDs, started talking to my peers, and ended up on the AIT committee. Then being the vice chair and ultimately becoming the chair for it. And then that's where we put the IMGs on the map. We started having, thankfully, with the change in direction and with our faculty's help, with the help of our GP head of school, we started changing the term from difficult trainees to trainees being in difficulty, and we wanted people to look at IMGs as not as difficult, but sometimes some IMGs can be in difficulty, and that's shaped how the West Midlands now works and the faculty works. So you will find that if you're from in the areas of West Midlands, please reach out to your faculty. We're very, very warm, vibrant faculty, which the next slide will show. We're very diverse. If I could have the next slide. So, that's the picture from our last faculty board meeting. As you can see, some registrars in there, some post-CCT doctors, some very experienced GPs there. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. We have won the Vibrant Faculty Awards 4 times now. So if you don't know about Vibrant Faculties, I will put a link. So college is very, very, I guess, hot on trying to make sure everyone's included, and we celebrate the diversity and the initiatives that different faculties do every year in promoting all that diversity and all that challenges that people face and overcome. So whistle stop tour to English faculties, which is huge. Welcome aboard. And if you have any questions, I'll hang around and try and answer them in the chat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naseem. That was really helpful. And just moving on then to Dr. Ogunlarin, who is a GP specialty trainee based in Scotland. As a GP registrar, co-chair for the RCGP West Scotland faculty and a BMA representative, Dr. Ogunlarin dedicates much of his time outside of clinical practice to supporting peers, improving workplace culture, and helping doctors transition smoothly into their training pathways. Over to you, Dr. Ogunlarin.
Hello, everyone. I'm really sorry for not having a slide. I'm actually currently on vacation and on my annual leave. I'll be giving this broad overview from Amsterdam, actually. So, yes, from Scotland, it's quite unfair that we're going to summarize the entire Scotland in 1 or 2 slides, but I will try my best to give an overview. So in Scotland, we have about 5 faculties. North of Scotland has the islands, the beautiful places like places used for, Harry Potter and the likes like that. East of Scotland, that includes Dundee towards Fife, the Kelpies, and also the northeast Scotland as the Aberdeen, um, Moray. Also, we have Southeast Scotland, which is the most popular part of Scotland, where we have the Edinburgh, the headquarters of Harry Potter, obviously, and also West Lothian, Scottish Border, and South Fife. Now, my faculty is West of Scotland faculty, and it's the largest faculty in Scotland. We have over 2,000 members. It includes Greater Glasgow, Clyde, Lanarkshire, and also my area, which is Ayrshire and Arran. Towards the south side, we have Dumfries and Galloway. So, how you would want to ask, how did I manage to become the co-chair of this entire area, especially Scotland that has different varieties of accents, cultures, and tradition, things that are quite odd for somebody coming from outside the UK. I think where it all started from was from ST1 when I met Akram Hussein, and I met some other fantastic IMG members of GP Scotland. And over the years, we've been in touch through different activities going on in the college. So the realistic questions that most people would want answer to is, how do I get involved? How do I get in touch with these people? If I have a special talent or something that I want to do outside GP, how will I be able to incorporate it into the college? So the college is so vast in terms of supports they provide. It's not just about your training, but your extracurricular activities, your social life, what you can do as a person, not just as a doctor. One of the challenges I believe we face as IMG is incorporating ourselves into the culture of the new environments we face ourselves in. It's not just about the medicine, it's about the communication, things you need to say, how you listen to people, the body language, and all of that. And realistically, how you can improve on this is actually having interactions with people around you. Where else can you get this experience if not at the college? Personally, one of the things I was quite conscious about is how I am perceived as at work. Coming from a culture where we are reserved, we don't tend to give so much about ourselves. We don't like to share um, you know, personal experiences or news about ourselves. It was quite difficult at first for me to interact with people at work or socialize. But then I found it quite easy going to events, and it became part of me to just get to know people, get connected, and learn one or two things about this area. How does people like to do things? What does this word mean? What does that word mean? What are the events going on around me? Where can I find the IMGs that would help my cause? And this is something that RCGP was able to provide for me. So also I would like to mention that in September we are happy to host the next conference, which will be happening in Glasgow. So feel free to come to the conference. We'll be happy to welcome everyone. We have Haggies and Tatters. We have kids, bagpipes, and if at any point you meet me in person, I will speak maybe one or two Scottish slangs to welcome you to Scotland. And of course, if you want to get involved in RCGP Scotland, the best way to do that is to go to the page. It's well structured website where you have contacts of different advocates in your area that you can speak to. You can email directly. They are actually very friendly, very welcoming, and they'll be able to help you, get involved in RCGP Scotland. So that's from me. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for that. And if you can share a link to that event on the chat, I'm sure everyone will be very happy to check that out. And thank you to Dr. Ogunlarin and all our panelists for this segment. They'll be sticking around briefly to answer any questions you might have about the local faculties or different areas. So please feel free to continue using the Q&A box for that as we move on now. We'll be hearing next from Dr. Sylvia Sylvia Kamakige on community representation and voice. She'll be introducing the RCGP IMG SIG, or Special Interest Group. Dr. Sylvia Kamakige is an out-of-hours GP supervisor with Sheffield GP Collaborative. She's a GP tutor and examiner at the University of Sheffield Medical School. She is vice chair of the RCGP South Yorkshire and North Trent faculty and a trustee of the Faculty of Sexual and Reproductive Health. Thank you, Sylvia, for your time. And again, if you do have any questions for Dr. Kamakige, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box as we go along. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amina. Great to be here. I think I'll share my slides if that's okay. Let me see if I can do that. Please bear with me a second. Okay. Lovely. Thank you so much. Can you confirm you can see my slides okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Amazing. Lovely. Thank you so much for that introduction. Let me just update. All my fault because I should have really sent the update. So I'm faculty chair for the South Yorkshire North Trent faculty. Thank you so much to my co-speakers who did an excellent job in really breaking down the different faculties across the 4 nations. It's quite complicated, but I think you guys did an excellent job. So I'm part of the English faculties and part of the North of England or the North England faculty. So I chair the South Yorkshire North Trent faculty. I'm looking forward to meeting members of my faculty amongst you in one of the events at some point, and hopefully at the conference that Samson just mentioned. I'm also, because of my interest in women's health, within the College of Sexual and Reproductive Health Care, I do wear a couple of hats in that area, both as a member of the Board of Trustees, as Amina said, but also as the Vice Chair for Membership and Workforce and co-chair of the EDI Committee. And I say all that because I love general practice. I think it gives you so much opportunity to really spread your wings and make a huge impact in your community. And I'm so thrilled to welcome all of you here to your professional home, because this is what the college is. You've entered this specialty right from this point throughout your training, all through your career as GPs. This is your professional home. So this is our first opportunity to highlight this to you, or at least amongst our first opportunities to highlight this to you about how important the college and your local faculties are. So my task today is to give you a snapshot really of the International Medical Graduates Special Interest Group. So I'm going to give you just a whistle-stop tour, hopefully not take too much of your time doing that. I've been a GP for about 16 years. And I say that because as a trainee, we didn't have IMG representation as we do today. In fact, 5 years ago, we didn't have the kind of representation as we do today. So I'm really pleased that you have this opportunity, and not just to be part of what is available and what others have grown in the last 4 or 5 years, but we're looking to you as the future to help us to continue to grow the support that IMGs need. So what is the IMG SIG? Let me just talk a little bit about what the SIG is. Some of you may know already. So the Special Interest Group, which is what SIG stands for, really is a community for GPs who share a common interest about a particular subject. Last count, we were under 30, I think 29 SIGs. I will put the link to the SIG, or maybe the admins will put the link for you in the chat. So we're about 29 at the moment, and you have different groups that come together as SIGs. It's not just educational or professional, really personal and well-being. So you have men's health, adolescent SIG, the AI and digital SIG, content creation SIG, urgent care, women's health, parent and carers special interest group, and of course the International Medical Graduate SIG. And the idea behind the SIG is recognizing that at least behind the International Medical Graduate Group, was that no group, when we've thought about this, really provided that representation for issues specifically related to international medical graduates, either people who have a primary medical qualification or outside the United Kingdom, or those who identify by way of heritage or culture as international medical graduates. So when it all started, I would say was back in 2022. We started as the North of England Faculties International Medical Group, because we just recognized that we need to have a space, we need to have a a sort of cohesive community that celebrates and supports and recognizes things that challenge or affect IMGs and be able to provide a perspective. So we started really in the north of England, and it was last year, just before the middle of last year, that we evolved into a SIG. So like many of the SIGs the college has, we're sort of fairly new, but the mission hasn't changed. It's really to create a forum where IMGs are supported and celebrated, represented, amplify problems, provide signposting, education, awareness on topical issues. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you examples in a couple of minutes about some of the things that we've done. So it's a voice that gives a voice to IMG doctors. It's open to all. It's a community. I think it's really important to say that it is a community. And previous speakers had referenced some of the isolation that people might experience. And hopefully this is one of the channels that we can use to address that, so that you don't feel on your own when you come into a space where it looks like you're the only type of individual, or you're the only skin color that exists in that place, or the only tone of voice or accent that exists in that space. And it brings back memories. When I first came into South Yorkshire from London, I came into Barnsley to start my attachment, and I got into the interchange. I literally just stepped out of the coach and stepped on the ground, and as I came out, everybody around me did not look, I couldn't see a single black face around. And I think what sort of pushed it home was, as I sort of got my bags and I was trying to find my way around, I had this little boy, maybe not more than 5 or 6 years, who just stopped and stared at me. And I don't know what else. I don't think it was my braids. I don't think it was my outfit. I think it was just, he's not seen anyone like me in this area. So this was Barnsley back in 2004, 2005. So a while ago, not the same as what it is now. But I can imagine that there may be some areas where there is that experience, or not even that experience. You may be in little groups or clinics or teams where you really are the only Black person. And that happens to me even today. I'm the only Black face in the room. And not to be intimidated, not to feel as if you don't belong. I think it's a challenge. But I think it's great that we're stepping up, and would really encourage you to do that when you have the opportunity. And it is what we want to support you to do in the SIG. So what is the role of the SIG within the college? Like I've said all along, just trying to act as a voice for IMG members, provide insight, provide advocacy as well. I'm just going to talk you through some of the things that we've done or we're doing. We've been involved in providing induction support, both centrally, that is as an entire college-wide event, or locally. So hopefully you will have your different faculty leads or IMG leads organizing meets or lunches or evening outs, just to get to know you and for you to get to know them and know the faculty. I know that different faculties have such arrangements. So hopefully that will happen. In SYNT, we have ours coming out sometime in September. We will share the event information, usually through the faculty newsletter. So please, when you get the newsletter, I know you have a lot of stuff to go through. I totally appreciate that. And that your mind is going to be on training, absolutely. But, just spend maybe 1 or 2 seconds or 1 or 2 minutes to go through the faculty newsletter, because it does capture really useful information. So we've done things like participate in induction. We've organized events. Usually we organize quarterly events based on things that we think are relevant to IMG doctors. And a lot of our focus tends to be people who have just arrived in the country. But we have run events around clinical scenarios, events that have been delivered by the GMC, looking at fitness to practice, the MDU, looking at consent and confidentiality. We've done things around the imposter syndrome. We've worked on leadership. We've worked on reflection of your e-portfolio, and we've looked at portfolio careers for GPs. So just to give you a flavor of some of the events that we put on as webinars that we think will be useful. And we don't just come up with those ideas. We do sort of listen to what IMGs are saying to us are the things that they want to hear, that they want to know more about. We're also involved in advocacy work, providing an IMG perspective to the college on IMG related issues, particularly to college leadership. And some of the more recent issues that have come up have been around the visa, issues relating to IMGs, the Medical Training Prioritization Bill, which was passed into law earlier this year. Some of you may have heard about this, and how we worked with the college to provide the perspective on how this could potentially impact IMGs, and worked with the policy team to see, could we push back on some areas that we felt were unfair. And even though I would say that we didn't get all of what we wanted, I think it's important that there was a voice that was cohesive, a voice that was structured, to demonstrate that this is an important issue and you cannot ignore the value and the provision that IMGs have delivered over years of working in the NHS. We've also been involved in doing things like highlighting concerning public commentary, social media commentary that's negative around IMGs, working with the college to look at constructive ways to address them. I remember there was on social media, there was some public figure making some very disparaging remarks about IMGs earlier this year. We worked with the college to look at how to address such, how can we devote campaigns to demonstrate, because sometimes we're doing so much, but nobody's hearing about it because it's not visible in a way that people can reference on. And so it's easy to spread that misinformation. So we work with the college to try and look at how do we address campaigns to highlight the things that we are doing. We're also involved in focus group activities within this IMG SIG. For example, working with your GP Registrar co-chairs to explore issues affecting IMG trainees and how to support them, participating in focus groups within the reasonable adjustments team to gather a range of perspectives and experiences. So I'm just sharing this to give you a snapshot. I appreciate that it might just sort of go, it may not be so much relevant at this point, because I appreciate that as you're just starting out, that there are other things that are closer in focus in your mind, but just for you to be aware that there is a group, there is a community, it is growing stronger and stronger. It's fairly new, but we recognize that it's important that we have a cohesive voice. The college comes to us when they want to hear what is the IMG community saying about this. When we come across something that we feel is problematic or not helping us as IMGs, we bring it up to the college and say, well, how are we going to deal with this? This is the situation, this is the concern. And I'm pleased that we have that voice that is listened to. So why does this matter? We didn't have this space 5 years ago, like I said earlier. It's an opportunity to provide a unique perspective, help to shape decisions around what matters to IMGs, support IMGs to thrive, help with creating a network. And I should have said this at the beginning. I am an IMG of Nigerian heritage. I've been in the UK since 2004. I haven't qualified from the College of Medicine of the University of Lagos in Nigeria. My experience as a doctor and as an IMG, and I'm sure we'll share with my colleagues who are panelists and with yourselves, it has been interesting. It has been, yes, there have been challenges, absolutely, but you do find support. And like people have said earlier, networking is so important, not just sitting back and suffering in silence, if you like. Yes, we are conservative from many of our cultural backgrounds, but there are people who will provide you with support, who just want you to say, hey, how do you do this? Or where can I find this information? And the IMG SIG is one of those places. So I'm just going to round up by saying, let's connect. Membership is free, open to all college members. We want you to attend our events, our webinars. We want you to contribute your ideas. We want to hear from you. Where is it biting? Where is it pinching? We also want to celebrate you as well. As part of the SIG, you might volunteer for small projects or to be part. If there's a focus group that's being set up somewhere, we may come to you and say, hey, are you interested in this? Or we may, just ask who's interested in contributing to this or participating in this. I will drop the link to the SIG joining form in the chat. But on this last slide, there is a QR code. Sorry, just a second. I'll just finish up with this. There is a QR code. If that doesn't work, I'll put the link in the chat as well. And just a quick mention as well of an upcoming event. The speed mentoring activity will be happening at the RCGP annual conference, which I believe is October. So on the 29th of October, this information is going to be shared widely as we approach the date. So look out for this. But we have this hour where it's a fast-paced speed mentoring session where you have expert facilitators that are going to answer your burning questions around careers, your visa, training, leadership, life in UK general practice. So hopefully you'll be able to walk out with real connections and practical advice. So you are the reason this group exists. We want to work with you. We're happy that you're here. We look forward to working with you and hopefully bumping into you at some event or the other in the very near future. Thank you so much, Amina, for the opportunity, and questions, happy to take them.
Thank you so much for that. And yes, please feel free to continue to ask questions in the Q&A section. I'm just going to move on now to Dr. Molly Deneen and Dr. Iman Shamsi, who's already said hello to us as well. Just talking about your voice in training as a GP registrar representative. So Molly is an ST3 GP registrar and an academic clinical fellow in Bristol. She is currently co-chair of the National RCGP GP Registrar Committee with Dr. Tom France, who couldn't join us today. And she is a GP registrar rep on the RCGP 7 faculty board as well. Dr. Iman Shamsi is a GP ST3 registrar in Hull, president of Hull Medical Society and RCGP registrar rep for the Humber and Ridings faculty. She is also currently a national RCGP GP registrar vice co-chair. So over to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I will just start sharing our screen. This is my holiday. You guys don't need to worry about that. So, are we all able to see that? Brilliant. So nice to meet all of you guys, and thank you, Amna, for such a lovely introduction for both of us. I thought I'd kickstart things off, and then Molly will jump on in and give us the meatier topics that we'll talk about afterwards. But we thought it's really important as an IMG to know how you can get your voice heard throughout in your role as GP registrar, because it can feel like quite a vast system to work through, and you feel like, oh gosh, am I at the bottom of this food chain, and how do I, grapple with everything? But ultimately, your voice can be heard at so many different levels. And I want to hopefully leave you guys with these next couple of minutes, just trying to focus on how you can get yourself heard through this process, in addition to everything we've heard so far today. So, who are your national GP registrar representatives? So as Amna had just said, that's our lovely Molly Deneen, looking really nice, bright and chirpy in blue. And she's a GP registrar co-chair alongside Dr. Tom France, who's looking very dapper in his suit right there, over there as well, which is great. So they collectively are our co-chairs for the GP registrar network, okay? And then we've got Alex, who is a dear friend of mine, as well as my co-vice chair alongside me, which is really lovely. So we both collectively together again make decisions. Now, usually within the RCGP council, you usually only have two voices. So you have one chair, one vice chair. So we've really squeezed as many GP registrars in a very small amount of space, as I'm sure you guys are aware. But ultimately, that's because we care so much and we really want our GP registrar voice to be heard at that sort of national level. Okay. So what exactly is this GP Registrar Representative Network? So our vision ultimately is that we would love for every VTS or vocational training scheme, essentially this is your training scheme that you are on, to have one representative, and then they attend their faculty, okay? Your faculty, what's really confusing, it does not actually, it's not the same sometimes as the deanery that you're within. So you may have to look on the RCGP page and map to figure out which city or where you're located based on which faculty would be best for you. But ultimately, that's our vision. We want one representative from every training scheme to join their faculty so that we hear the more voices, and then with more voices, you get to understand what's going on and make sure that it's heard higher up, if that makes sense. Through your faculty representatives, ultimately, you'll have one lead from that faculty who basically comes to represent you on a more national level. And then they feed into ourselves. So just to have a better idea of how all of us look at how friendly we all look in this lovely photo. So this is something from our Advocate Summit. So basically, when you attend certain things or when you become a representative, you can basically come to certain types of events, including the Advocate Summit, which is an event which is run by the RCGP for all of the advocates to show how much hard work and support you guys have created. Because all of this work we're doing does feed into the system and does help to improve things. So I think it's really brilliant to have your little stamp and leave a legacy behind by joining things like this, in my opinion. But that's a really nice one from earlier on this year. So again, just to help you visualize it a little bit better, you have your GP registrar, you have your training scheme registrar representative, then going into your faculty, then having one lead off of all of those faculty reps, then feeding in towards our the chair or vice chair role, and then that gets heard at this RCGP council. So RCGP Council is basically where a lot of main decisions within the direction of where RCGP happens. And I think it's sometimes helpful to know how that system works so that way you know, okay, well, if I raise something, what's actually going to be done about it? And you can figure out, it can be, if it's an issue that's affecting so many different areas, actually, you know what, this may need to be heard or escalated even further. Okay. And so with why we got involved, I will let Molly come in on this.
Perfect. Thanks, Aman. Yeah, lovely to meet you all. So as Amin has introduced me already, I'm Dr. Molly Deneen and one of the GP Registrar co-chairs. So there's lots of reasons why Aman and I and our other kind of chairs and co-chairs, but also our representatives got involved in this registrar network. And we really hope that you might be inspired to get involved in the network too, because this is a real kind of opportunity to influence the system that we're working in. And it's amazing how loud our voice at the college is as registrars, and we really hope that you might want to be part of that. So the kind of number one reason is to improve and to shape GP training. So as registrars, if we identify things that could be better in our training or ways that we could feel more supported, this is our way to influence that. And to ask for change. So this is kind of one of the real motivators to improve training, both for ourselves, but for our future colleagues. To develop leadership skills, it's a really good leadership opportunity to be part of this network, whether you're representing a small group in your local level or your faculty level or even up at national level. It's a really good opportunity to develop those leadership skills that you may need in the future. To try something new. This is probably something you haven't been part of before. And as a GP registrar, it's a really good opportunity to push yourself and to see what kind of other areas of your career you might want to experience. I think a really important thing is experiencing that connection with other registrars. So if you're a faculty representative, as you saw that lovely picture, you'll come together with all the other faculty representatives at our Advocate Summit and regularly at our registrar meetings. Equally, if you're just hosting kind of local meetings with your local registrar reps, it can be a really good way to meet other registrars and to understand what else kind of registrars are struggling with. And sometimes it can be really reassuring that if something in your region, you're finding really difficult, it can be reassuring to hear that that's something else going on in other regions and then to team up to try and solve that problem. So sometimes that can be a really nice reassurance. And we can genuinely make a difference. So I'll talk through some of the things we've done already this year, but we have made kind of really positive changes for GP registrars and also represented GP registrars in really important national conversations. So whenever anything big is changing in terms of policy, we're often consulted on what's the registrar view, and we can really kind of be loud in kind of saying what we as kind of the future GPs want in terms of big kind of policy and legislation change. So we really can impact change, and that's really exciting. Oh, I think there was one more at the bottom of that slide that I've missed. To be part of something bigger. Yeah, absolutely. So I think most of us kind of went from being a local VTS rep and then thought, oh, this is really exciting and we can make some change and I might want to do that on a bigger level. And so you become a faculty rep and then you can make change in your whole region. And then you get kind of the bug for it and you want to make a change on a national level. So you'll kind of slowly find yourself hopefully tempted into making change on a bigger and bigger scale. Thanks, Aman. So we're working on, as a registrar committee, we try and align the things we're working on with the kind of college's priorities, but things that we, particularly as registrars, reps, have been working on this year, the things that we think are the 5 most important things at the moment for GP registrars. And number 1, increasing the representation of voice for GP registrars. So a lot of what Emma and I have just explained to you about the representative network we've built over the last kind of year or so to try and increase representation of registrars so that registrars, right down to VTS level can be representatives. And as Eman said, we managed to squeeze 4 of us into our 2 roles on the council. So again, this is trying to increase the voice and the representation of registrars at the college. And we think we're being fairly successful in that. We've been addressing the kind of workforce sustainability issues, specifically for IMGs, trying to address the visa issues, so those that have been struggling to get visas after they qualify as a GP. And we've been working really hard on that with the college, and ensuring that there's equality in progressing kind of careers beyond CCT. So we've been doing lots of work with Amina and the college to try and improve that. We've been working hard on making sure GP training experience is consistent across the UK. So we've been doing work looking at study leave and teaching delivery, making sure that things are as consistent as possible while adapting to the local populations, but making sure wherever you train in the UK, you get a consistent high quality experience. And we've been working together as a registrar committee to do audits and things, looking at kind of what we're getting in each region and whether that's kind of equitable. So that's been a big piece of work. We've been looking at making sure that working conditions are inclusive and safe and sustainable, advocating for things like your protected self-development time. And it's really important to remember that you get your protected self-development time in both GP and hospital placements. So we've been really advocating for that, making sure GP training is really protected in whatever environment you're working in, and that it feels kind of inclusive and safe. And then improving the value of RCGP membership, making it really clear that registrars know what they get for their membership. And my colleague Tom France has been working really hard to try and make the fees a little bit lower and make them kind of as affordable as possible. And that's something we've had great success on over the last few years. So we've been doing a huge amount of work, and that's kind of a bit of a snapshot of the sort of things we've been working on. So hopefully this kind of registrar network that's available to you is something you want to get involved in. And we'd really like to see increased representation from IMG registrars as well, to make sure that your voices and issues are heard and we can address them, and really include them in the work that we're doing. And we do have a great network of IMGs as part of our registrar network, so please do get involved. And again, this will help you build your professional network, meet like-minded colleagues, and progress your skills and experience in leadership. It definitely gives you a better understanding of how the whole process of GP training works and how the college works, which is really important, particularly if you want to kind of continue in a leadership career. It's a great opportunity to meet registrars, not just at the representative summits, but also at things like the annual conference and other kind of college events. So I'd really encourage you to get involved at any level, or even just come along and just observe, which you're more than welcome to do, to some of our meetings, just to see how it happens and to see whether it's something you'd like to be a part of. And we'd love you to have a voice in improving training to make it the best experience possible for you and for future colleagues. So please do get involved. I think on the next slide, hopefully we might have our contact details, but if not, do visit the kind of faculty websites. Basically the first step is to get involved in your faculty. So if you've got any questions, go to your faculty, ask if you can become a GP representative. My journey started by emailing my local faculty in ST1 and saying, can I join the board? And the next week I had joined my first board meeting, and it went from there. So just contact your local faculty, see how you can get involved, and then hopefully you can be fed into the national network as well. But feel free to get in touch with Eman or I, and Eman will be hanging around for the Q&A later in this session if you've got any specific questions, and hopefully we can share our email address as well as representatives that you can get in touch with. But we'd love to hear from you. We'd love you to come along to our meetings and to represent your local area. So yeah, lovely to meet you all, and hopefully see you all soon.
Thank you so much for that, Molly and Iman. Yes, Iman will be sticking around to answer any questions that we have in the Q&A. And for now, we will move on to our next segment. We'll be moving on to talking a little bit about neurodiversity in GP training, and we'll have our panel with Dr. Olivia Mesquita and Dr. Signe Hassan. Dr. Mesquita graduated from the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences in India and now works as a salaried GP in the UK. She holds the role of IMG co-lead for the RCGP Southwest Thames faculty and co-chair of Southeast Coast Regional Council Forum for Racial and Ethnic Equality. Olivia is neurodivergent and holds the belief that timely diagnosis and effective management can have meaningful impact on people's lives. Dr. Signe Hassan qualified from Qasr Al Aini Faculty of Medicine, Cairo University, before pursuing her career in general practice in the UK. She is currently a salaried GP at Woodlands Family Practice, works as an out-of-hours GP with Medway Community Healthcare, and is an educational fellow at Kent and Medway Medical School. As co-IMG lead for the RCGP South East Thames faculty, she is passionate about supporting international medical graduates and promoting inclusive, high-quality medical education. So we've got some really experienced and helpful panelists here. But before we hear directly from our speakers, I want to briefly introduce some key concepts about neurodiversity for you all. So, neurodiversity, the National Autistic Society describes this as the fact that all human brains and nervous systems are different from one another. No two brains are exactly the same. Just as biodiversity describes variation across living things, neurodiversity describes the variation in how people process information, communicate, experience their senses, and respond to the world around them. So we are all part of neurodiversity. Neurodivergence has a more specific meaning. Some groups of people have significant shared differences in their experience and reaction compared to most people. And when these significant differences are neurocognitive, meaning they are to do with how information from the senses is processed by the brain, that group is described as neurodivergent. The form of neurodivergence most commonly discussed tend to be autism and ADHD, but also dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette syndrome, and a few others. There's no official or universal agreed list. Another useful concept to mention is the spiky profile. This means that someone may have very marked or above average strengths in some areas alongside some difficulties in others. And this is a common type of neurocognitive profile for those who are neurodivergent. For example, someone may be excellent at pattern recognition or attention to detail, but at the same time, they might find organization or processing verbal instructions much more difficult. And this can sometimes be misunderstood because people can assume that someone who's very highly capable should be equally strong in every area. But intelligence, academic success, or even clinical ability don't necessarily link to differences in things like working memory, attention regulation, or sensory processing. So the key message about spiky profiles is that being excellent in one area doesn't remove the need for understanding or support in another. So why is this important in GP training? So some of us have trained or worked in countries where neurodivergence was mainly recognized in children or only when someone had very visible or significant support needs. And that can create a very narrow picture of what autism, ADHD, or other forms of neurodivergence look like. In reality, neurodivergence exists across every culture, profession, and level of achievement. It's estimated to encompass around 1 in 7 people globally, although this is likely to be an underestimate because of awareness and assessment and reporting services being different in different parts of the world. And neurodivergent people can be doctors, academics, leaders, researchers, educators, and some of these careers may even unintentionally attract for the traits of people who are neurodivergent as well. In the UK, neurodivergence is increasingly recognised and discussed openly, including within medical education and professional settings. Although there is still some stigma and misunderstanding, they've not disappeared entirely, awareness and acceptance have grown considerably. For international doctors, this may be different from your previous cultural or professional experiences, and it might also mean that you encounter colleagues or supervisors or other trainees who speak openly about being autistic, having ADHD, dyslexia, or another form of neurodivergence. And the key message really is that high achievement doesn't rule out neurodivergence, and a doctor can be highly capable and successful while still experiencing some genuine barriers in areas such as, I mentioned, working memory or sensory processing, organization, communication, task switching, and similar. So this is just a quick overview about neurodivergence, the terms we'll be using, and why we're talking about it today. So I would actually like to move now on to our panelists, so Dr. Hassan and Dr. Mesquita, just to ask a little bit about their journey, so they can tell you how it's been for them. So. I'd like to just ask you both really if you could briefly introduce yourselves and share the journey that brought you to where you are today when it comes to this. So we can begin with Dr. Mesquita.
Hi, Thanks for inviting me to this panel, Amina. And I'm going to try and sort of make this sound as normal as possible, some of the challenges that you might face. I just want to normalize that and reduce stigma around some of these things. So essentially where I am today is pure sort of serendipity and ADHD impulsivity. You know, when I finished medical school, the plan was to stay in India. I went traveling to New Zealand and saw that everyone around me was a 20-something-year-old going abroad, working for a bit, coming back home. So in 2019, I decided to do that and moved to the UK. And we all know what happened in 2020. You know, there were a lockdown and I was stuck here. So it was just sort of finding a new shiny thing and chasing it. And that's what I did with the UK. With regards to the neurodivergence, it was always suspected by my family. My family are very neurodivergence friendly. And because I did well at school, I think everyone just said, "Oh, she does well at school. Just support her with the other stuff." And my parents really did support me, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But I moved to the UK. I had a very supportive partner, but the wheels came off when he moved to the US. So, people in my life were really scaffolding me, so I never had to think about doing the dishes or taking the bins out or paying the bills, all these sort of everyday things that are very boring but require a lot of executive functioning. And that's when I thought, okay, my life is falling apart. I need to get assessed. People have always suspected it, and the medications have really, really helped. So that's the brief story of how I am where I am.
Thank you for that, Olivia. I'm just going to move on to Signe. Could you tell us a bit about yourself as well and the journey that brought you to where you are today?
Thanks, Amina. So like you said previously, I did qualify in Al-Sulaini, which is in Cairo, Egypt. And following that, myself and my husband moved here to the UK. Initially, I was extremely lucky in that my supervisor in my first role, which was as a neonatal SHO, was a consultant that had qualified from the same university. And as she was my supervisor, she noted which areas I would struggle with in the transition, was able to support me with that as an international medical graduate. And then I decided to move on to GP training, mainly because I had two young children at the time, and my husband was an OB/GYN registrar. So I started my journey in GP training and straight away went from a neonatal ICU to the emergency department, which was just a lot of sounds, a lot of smells, just a lot of chaos from a very organized environment. And I thought it was just every bit along that journey. I thought it's just a transition. It's just because of this or it's just because of that. It was only when I went on maternity leave and returned back and really struggled with that, with organizing with three children and with training and with exams, that my program director, who was very supportive as well, mentioned to me, maybe you should get assessed. So I did have a dyslexia assessment, and that was through the professional support unit down in London. And following that, I was able to get access to support that was like one-on-one basis. And I had 4 sessions and was able to have some support in place for exams and then for training going forwards. And following that, I did get an ADHD diagnosis as well. My brother had had the diagnosis for a few years, but I thought that was just because he moved to the US and they overdiagnosed, and that's kind of the story I went with. But once I had the diagnosis, it did take a little bit of time to come to terms with that. But once you have it and you try and understand yourself more and you accept yourself, then it just opens up a lot of doors for you to realize what your true potential is.
No, thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned there are some challenges with that transition from maternity leave back into training. What aspects of that transition did you find most challenging?
It was very hard to go back to 80%, which is the minimal that I could do with the visa requirements at the time, and have three children at different parts of their education and coordinate pickups and drop-offs while also running a surgery, and being there on time, leaving on time, because my husband was also working. So I found that really difficult while also trying to study for exams.
Mm. No, that's I think that's quite the key areas you've mentioned, some of the timekeeping, the balancing, the juggling. Olivia, you mentioned about your ADHD as well. Have you had sort of similar experience for a transition or any different challenges that you've experienced, and what helped you to overcome them really?
Yeah, so India is a very community-based society, so it's sort of you do everything as a community, whereas and that applies to training as well. So there would be someone, the team would hold the tasks, and someone would check that you've done your tasks, which was great for someone like me because I might forget to do a task, or if I haven't written it down, out of mind, out of sight is out of mind. But coming to the UK was really challenging because you have ownership of your tasks. The registrar is not holding a tasks list and making sure that everything is done, for the day. You're sort of responsible for that. And there is a lot of you know in the UK, you need a lot of executive functioning for doing very small things, like having your hair cut or bin day, for example. It sounds like I've got a lot of this real issue with bins, don't I? Because I've had my bins not collected multiple times. So it's one of those things. I just thought that the UK is a society where it's an individual has to do a lot for themselves. And the executive functioning that is needed for even small things is a lot. So it's very challenging is what I found. Whereas in India, there was, my strengths were different to maybe my sibling strengths or my family or my neighbor strengths. So I just think there was a slight difference in how much support you have, I suppose.
No, and you touched on a little bit about culture there, and also mentioned about how your family was really supportive and very open about it. Signe, how did you find sort of the culture or family expectations or attitudes affected sort of your experience with neurodivergence?
So with my family, I think quite a few of us are neurodivergent, but only myself and my brother have come to accept that. And we are a very highly academic, high achieving family. Both my parents are university lecturers. So when I came to them and told them about my diagnosis, they thought, "What are you saying? You've been achieving your whole life. You've done all of this. How can that relate to what you're saying today?" But years later, they've now come to accept that and found those traits within themselves. In terms of culturally, I think the Western society is a lot more open, in my experience anyway, to accepting neurodiversity, and that it doesn't have to look like the more serious or more difficult cases that we see in children who have multiple disabilities. Whereas in an high achieving adult, they're like, how could you be neurodivergent? That doesn't really fit in with the story. So yeah, I think those are the differences. And like Olivia was saying, in terms of the scaffolding that you get in different cultures, my mom's American, so that culture, it's kind of similar to the UK in that you do a lot for yourself and you're meant to kind of be responsible for those from a young age. So I knew that that was there, but there's differences from being a child to being an adult and a mom and a professional and working on visas and homework and your own exams. So I think the more responsibility grows, the more you realize where the difficulties lie.
No, absolutely. And Olivia, for you, did you find that to be sort of a challenge in you seeking support in terms of what attitudes might there be in the society, or did that push you to seek your diagnosis or support?
I think even in my house, even though they were very open to making adjustments and accommodations, there was a reluctance to label. So there is I think that's there. People don't like labels back home. So or even here, when I've spoken to my IMG friends who have a diagnosis of neurodivergence, they're very keen to keep it concealed. They don't want people to know because they're worried about judgment, or worried about someone judging their ability to do things. So I think that is something in culture that we ought to sort of change and normalize things. So I think that's that. But I think we do also underestimate the executive burden we have, especially I love that you mentioned the visa stuff. You literally have to become a little immigration lawyer yourself and have like diligent stacks of paperwork and things like that. So yeah, I think it's we do underestimate that, and that is a real challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know that we've focused a little bit on the challenges and the barriers here, and sometimes neurodivergence can sometimes focus heavily on, those challenges specifically. But what strengths have your different experiences and ways of thinking brought to your clinical work or with your relationships with patients? If you could speak to that, Olivia.
Yeah, I think ever since I was a child, the one thing I was blessed with was hyper focus, and I was always keen on learning. So I was very good at sitting and reading, which made me very good at taking exams. I've always done well at exams. I'm quite good at what I'm interested in. So, I was quite good at doing procedures that needed focus. But then equally, I would come home and doing the dishes would make my heart rate go up to like 140. So you think small things that need a lot of working out would just be awful. But I do think people with neurodivergence, some parts of it, so I'm very impulsive, so very social, made lots of friends after moving to the UK, have a great social circle, have taken up every opportunity I found. But also, I'd like to mention this podcast called You Are Not a Frog, and they have had a episode with someone called Matthew Bellringer, if I've got that name right, and they speak about how a lot of people with ADHD go on to become project managers because over life they've used coping skills to almost externalize their brain and sort of do everything in life like a little project that they have to manage. And this is what I've seen in my father, and I've got really good at that. So I've got lots of little coping strategies. I've got a diary where I write everything down. So these are all things that have been really helpful over the years. The ADHD has come with challenges, but it's come with its benefits.
Thank you for that. And Signe, what about you? Sort of what strengths have you sort of experienced or found in with your dyslexia and also with the ADHD? Has that changed the way that you lead, the way that you work, or how you are as a doctor?
I think being aware that I have both of those diagnoses has made me like more accepting of myself and thus more confident and accepting of others as well. I've noticed with dyslexia, pattern recognition is really well developed, and that has helped massively clinically, especially in general practice, where you get so many complicated stories. And then when you get to be able to put that story together and finish the last puzzle piece, it's so rewarding both for yourself and for the patient to be like, oh, this was missed. And I can see that pattern that's gone on for years, and this is what it's showing us today. I also feel like I do well in one-to-one conversations, especially with vulnerable patients, mental health patients, maybe because I can pick up on their feelings and emotions and kind of try and balance that out as well. And I think, like Olivia was saying, in terms of hyperfocus and projects, I feel like the best thing that works for me anyway is to have 3 different projects going. And when you get bored of one, you start the other one so that you have something that's, feeding into your creative energy at all times, because I found that that's the most fulfilling and helps you go on with things that you find more mundane, like paperwork. I will say that having like AI digital systems has changed my life, and I mean that in no small way, and it's saved me hours every single day.
No, amazing. And that's a really useful tip as well. We have a question in the chat, and I know PSW was mentioned already, but Olivia, would you mind just talking to where a doctor in training needs to go to be assessed for neurodivergence?
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of assessment you're thinking of. So there's 2 types. There's a ed psych assessment or an education psychology assessment, which when I was a trainee, all resident doctors would have the option to be screened So the training program would send out questionnaires, and you could be screened if you met a threshold, you could opt to be assessed, and that assessment was free of charge. So yes, that's an adjustment. They are an educational psychology assessment. So they will sort of identify whether you've got a slow processing speed, could you have dyslexia, and they might say you have traits of ADHD or traits of autism. They will make recommendations for exam adjustments and things like that. But what they can't do is they can't formally diagnose ADHD or autism. They can say you show traits of it. For a formal diagnosis of ADHD or autism, you would have to do that via your GP, or I suppose people go and seek private diagnosis. Now, with most NHS services, the wait times for a neurodivergence diagnosis, you just have to name a number and that could be true. So if you say 5 years, that might be true for the wait list times. If you say 15 years, that might also be true for the wait list times. The wait list times are really long. So there is something called as right to choose. And I can share that. I can share a link to right to choose. So you can go to your GP. If your GP thinks that you have enough of the criteria for an assessment, then they can refer you down the right to choose pathway. And different areas will have different requirements for it, but that is an option. What I would also recommend is speaking to your local service. So sometimes they do sort of prioritize certain profession groups, that in sort of various services. So it might be worth speaking to your local NHS service, and they might have a list of professions that they might prioritize, and that might include doctors and things like that. So yeah.
No, thanks for that, Olivia. I know with the dyslexia screening, not every deanery or every training program does do that for everyone, so it might be different for where you are. Signe, was your experience any different in terms of the pathway you used?
During my time in training, it was offered if you'd had difficulties with exams. So if you haven't passed the AKT from the first attempt and your program director felt that you could benefit from it, then they would refer you to the PSU to have the assessment.
Okay, yeah, and PSU is
Professional support unit, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So most of the training programs will have a professional support unit with them, and there will be usually websites for your local deanery that have links to your local professional support unit and the services that they offer, which can include this screening and then advice regarding reasonable adjustments. So in terms of reasonable adjustments, I think we just need to talk a little bit about this and what this means. So, Olivia, can you tell us a little bit about reasonable adjustments that you might have had that made a sort of a practical difference to you during your training?
So I didn't have any reasonable adjustments. In fact, the one adjustment I had, so I was given extra time for my exam, but I left before the exam was done because I just couldn't sit through the whole exam. So I did my paper and I left. But what's helped on the other end is I don't want to, push for medication, but all of the coping strategies are good, but it made me very tired, sort of having to refer to a book for everything, my journal for everything, and the cognitive load was far too much. So medications have really helped me, and they changed my life. People could see a palpable difference between me pre-medication and post-medication. There were things that I just wasn't able to do that I can do now. Coaching was also quite helpful, and some of the things that were suggested to me from coaching are, this tick timer. So it's got sort of timers on the side, and it sort of really helped me keep to time. So it would sort of buzz, and I would know, okay, this is enough chat, time to get down to the business, to get down to business with the patient. As well, because I used to always like double, triple, quadruple book myself because everything was in my head. I have this big planner. I don't know if you can see it. I think my background's blurred. But anyway, you get the gist. It's a huge planner that sits on my wall that tells me what I'm doing for the day. And I also have a bullet journal that I use. That was also suggested to me by coaching. So medication and coaching were two things that have really, together helped. When I was younger, I used to have 2 clocks in my bedroom. So I've asked for that at the practice. And that helps, sort of keep me, keep track of time, know what time of day it is, how I'm running behind, etc. So yeah, those were the things that have helped me so far.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that. And Signe, what about you? Have you had any reasonable adjustments or other things that you've found that have provided you with good support in the way that you work?
So, in my practice when I was in training, I did have extra admin time. So, one of my sessions was divided into tutorial and then admin time so that I had extra time to complete those tasks. It was also really, really useful to know the secretaries and to communicate with them what pathways or things I might have difficulty with, and they found shortcuts or ways around that. I did have access to a dictation software.
Mhm.
And that really did help. But when they came up with the AI-powered dictation software, that was, like I said, that has been absolutely life-changing. And I no longer have to carry those words in my head or write down on several little bits of paper and then put them together. I also find colors are very helpful. So there are certain colors which I honestly don't like, but if I see them, I notice them straight away, like really bright neons or a bright red, and I have a bag for each roll. So I have a bright red bag for one roll, bright yellow for another, and I keep the equipment in those bags at all times, and they're never removed. Olivia mentioned calendars. The thing is, I do lose things like notebooks, so I have to keep them all in one place, and I honestly keep that on my phone. So I have a calendar on my phone, I have a calendar on the Alexa, and we have an Alexa in every room in the house. And she reminds you verbally, this is time for the kids' karate, it's time to do this. So all those kind of things coming together have really made a difference. Yeah, and of course medication that has there's like Olivia said, people can tell a difference before and after, even if they don't know what's changed.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And we have another question in the chat about any support networks. I know that there is a neurodiversity special interest group that is run by the college, which I can share too, and the British Association of Neurodivergent Doctors band. But I just wondered if either of you had any experience of any other networks that you found to be supportive, or if you've used any or not. Yeah, Signe, if you could tell us a bit about those, if at all.
So, I did have another trainee with me in training who had been the one who to tell me about the dyslexia pathway and then how to go about looking for a diagnosis as well, like the right to choose pathway through the GP. And she told me about some Facebook groups. And I do use Association of Neurodivergent Doctors. I find that they put up experiences, coping strategies, methods, what's worked, what hasn't, equally what kind of roles suit people best, according to their spiky profile. So I found that really, really useful.
Wonderful. And what about you, Olivia?
No, I agree. I do find the Association of Neurodivergent Doctors quite helpful. There is a WhatsApp group for body doubling. So, and I think there's apps for that as well,
Yeah.
So if you are someone who needs some body doubling is where I silently study and you silently study with me across a screen, if that makes sense. There are apps for that, there are groups for that. What I would also caution against is getting onto a WhatsApp group with lots of neurodivergent doctors who love a good chat, and then it's constantly pinging. There is the last I knew that if you seek help from Practitioner Health, which to currently still funded, they will have an assessment with you, and if they think that a neurodivergent support group would be helpful for you, they will signpost you to that service, and you can get on one of those groups. So that service also exists. If you're struggling with your mental health and you need to get help from Practitioner Health, they also have neurodivergent support groups if they think that would be appropriate for you.
Thank you for that. I've popped both of those links in the chat for the special interest group, Practitioner Health, and then I will try and find one for the Association of Neurodivergent Doctors as well. So just to wrap up this segment before we go into our break, what would you both give as a tip to an international doctor who's listening today, who recognizes aspects of themselves in this conversation, but it feels maybe a bit reluctant or worried about asking for help and what that might mean for them? Signe, could you offer us your top tips?
I want to say that firstly, you're not alone, and that as international doctors, you've already become really good at masking because you've adapted to a new country, a new healthcare system, and often another language as well. And to know that asking for support, that doesn't mean that you're admitting you're failing or that you're any less than anyone else. It's just giving yourself the absolute best chance for you to succeed and for you to fulfill your best potential. And I would encourage you to speak to someone that you trust. That could be your educational supervisor, your program director, it could be occupational health. It could be someone that you found approachable and you feel are, especially from the college, they do have a lot of support to offer there. I'd say that getting support doesn't mean you're lowering your standards. It just gives you the opportunity to demonstrate what you're truly capable of.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. I really like that. Olivia, what about you?
Concealment is a real problem in all medical professionals, so only about 1% of, I suppose, neurodivergent doctors are open about, oh, well, I don't know if that statistic is true, but it's something about only 1% of 1% of doctors admit that they're neurodivergent, whereas the proportions are probably far higher. So concealment is a problem. And if you don't sort of accept it, getting support is difficult. So what I'd recommend is get assessed. And if the diagnosis is not like a black mark on you or anything of the sort, if you didn't want to get formally assessed, but you just wanted some support around it, there is coaching out there. Even if you don't have a formal diagnosis, and you can try that first before you get assessed for medical support and help. So, but my strong advice would be get assessed. It's fine. You will get help. There's a lot of help out there.
Wonderful. And yes, I know sometimes people do worry about, what does it mean about future job prospects and things like that. That can be a big worry. As an employer myself, we have uh, an undiagnosed and a diagnosed neurodivergent doctor at our practice, and we have a couple of other members of staff in non-clinical roles who are also neurodivergent. They can be some of our best doctors in lots of ways and bring really added value to the team. We knew about their diagnosis when we hired them, and it wasn't anything that prevented us from recruitment. So if I think that sort of worry that people have, attitudes are shifting. And I'm not going to say that that's everyone, but certainly that those opportunities are there. And so for you guys, did you find in terms of applying for jobs and things like that, there was any barrier there, or was that all okay for you? Signe, if I ask you first.
Sure. So I think it's really important to find a place that values you for both your strengths and is able to support you for your weaknesses. I can say that I have had good and bad experiences, but realizing which places really support you and really value your growth, you find that, oh, actually, I wasn't the problem. I was just a plant in a wrong place, and I needed to move somewhere else so that I could fully grow. I will say that there is the Department of Work and Pensions that you can apply for. There's online, you can call them on the phone, and they do provide funding for reasonable adjustments in your workplace. Even if your workplace initially has to fund it, they will pay them back. So even if you're self-employed, they can also help with funding. So it is really something to look into.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Olivia, just a final word for you, and then we will go off on our break if that's okay.
Yeah, personally, I've not found any difference in applying to jobs, and I think it might even be like discriminatory or even illegal to discriminate on the basis of a disability, to not give someone a job on the basis of that. So bear that in mind, and yeah, so I wouldn't let that stop you from getting an assessment.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. I know this has generated lots of interesting questions, so please feel free to continue asking in the chat as we go now to our short break. It will just be for 5 minutes to give your brain a rest, go to the toilet, have a cup of tea. If you come back for 11:45, and we'll continue to answer some of these questions in the chat for you as well. Thank you. We'll see you all again shortly. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. That was a very short feeling 5 minutes, but it was 5 minutes. Thank you. So welcome back, everyone, and we thank you for the questions that have popped up during the break. We will try and answer these. A lovely comment from Ellie, thanking both Dr. Olivia and Signe for sharing their wonderful experience. You're inspirational, she says, and I definitely agree. Moving on to another inspirational speaker, we have Dr. Naveen Hosangadi Jayadev, who's going to be talking to us about who's around you. And this segment is all about organizations that can support you during training, some of which have been mentioned already, but just mapping that all together. So Dr. Naveen Hosangadi Jayadev is a GP partner and training program director at Chesterfield and Derbyshire Dales GP training program. He has over 10 years of experience in medical education. His focus lies in aiding overseas medical graduates in their transition to GP training, so all of you guys, and utilizing his extensive background in sports medicine. Dr. Hosangadi Jayadev employs sports psychology techniques to support GP registrars in managing exam stress and achieving optimal performance during AKT and SCA exams. So we're getting all of that insight and wisdom from him today for this segment. So over to you, Naveen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amina. Thank you for the introduction. Just to add a few bits and bobs. So I'm also TPD for AKT Structured Learning Program for East Midlands, and I'm also MSK lead for Derby and Derbyshire ICB. I'm a full-time GP. I am an IMG. I joined GP training in 2009. So whatever I'm saying, it comes from lived experience, as well as a lot of it is based on evidence. Next slide, please. The reason why we named it the talk as "Who is Around You" is because the single most important message I want to give you or for you to take away is you're not on your own. There are a group of people and organizations around you whose job is to make sure your training goes smoothly. Knowing them early who they are would make your journey, especially transition from coming from overseas to UK, much more easier, especially if you were unfortunate enough to get into a difficulty to progress in your training. IMGs are not new to NHS, so you are sort of following following the path of IMGs who have supported and foundation pillars of NHS. I'm not going to be dishonest or disingenuous if I can't highlight the challenges of transition. It is important to recognize it. And the heart of the session is to map out the people and services which are around you so that when a difficulty arises, you already know who they are or who to turn to. Next slide, please. First and foremost, a huge congratulations because you've done extremely well to reach here. So you have navigated through the difficult journey of passing IELTS or OET, PLAB exams, MSRA, and you've gone through the selection process. Here you are, and don't let anybody take this away from you, including sometimes imposter syndrome, your own inner critic. So the GMC survey in 2025 highlighted 42% of the workforce in NHS are IMGs. 25% of the GPs in England are IMGs. More than half of the trainee currently in GP training are IMGs, so you're not alone. IMGs were in the UK before NHS was founded in 1948. The first major influx of international medical graduates happened in 1950. Around 3,000 doctors came from Commonwealth countries. The second influx happened in 1963. About 18,000 doctors came here. IMGs are a significant part of NHS. Why am I highlighting this? So the problem started arising in around 1969, where a lot of BMJ articles started popping up from English doctors who were expressing concerns about standards of overseas doctors. This was not evidence-based, this was anecdotal. So Dr. Smith in 1969 conducted a brilliant survey, which was of research quality. He actually highlighted there was the problem with international medical graduates was not to do with the educational standards. They were all about cultural transition and language. So the most important message from this survey was once somebody has spent 3 years in the UK, most of the cultural transition problems went away. So this paper and the concerns led to something called as Medicine's Inquiry in 1975, which again highlighted the same problem, cultural linguistic issues, which led to the introduction of PLAB exams, the very exam you have all passed. So the concept I really want you to hang on to is about cultural shock. When you move to a new country, you pass through a typical phases of cultural transition. So initially, for the first 4 to 6 months, you'll be in a honeymoon period where you probably wouldn't even realize what's going on. Then you go through a phase of anxiety and frustration, and then gradual adjustment and finally acceptance will start happening. All this can take up to 2 years if you're not aware of it or whatever other reasons. It can take up to 2 years, and it is normal. It's definitely not a sign of weakness, and it is not a reflection on your ability as a doctor. It happens not just to the doctors, anybody, engineers, any professional who is going to another country, whether going from Nigeria to America, Canada, same thing happens. Okay. So the aim of everything I'm going to show you is simple: to shorten the time you spend in the difficult middle phase of that curve. We cannot skip the cultural shock, but with the right support around you, we can compress it, which is basically the aim of my talk today. Okay, next slide, please. So the key for all of this is planning and organization. So you can't just wing it. You can't wait for the last minute for things to happen. So most of your schemes will have a dedicated IMG handbook or a web page. Do have a look. It will have a wealth of information. On a national website called as e-learning for health, there is a new to NHS induction module for international medical graduates. It's worth going through that. So the first top tip. Second one, I can't emphasize, the first thing you should all be doing, if you're not done so, register with a GP. I cannot emphasize the importance of this. Do this within the first week when you arrive here. They can help you with your physical health. And also, I want to emphasize the importance of isolation with lack of social support around you, the toll it takes on mental health, especially in winter months. So as doctors, we are notorious at being patients. So do register with your GP. They will be your gateway for support with your mental health as well as physical health. And also they can signpost you to counseling and various whatever help you need. My previous speakers have already highlighted the importance of practitioner health. It's NHS practitioner health. This is free, confidential NHS service provided to all the doctors in the UK. It's confidential. You don't need a referral. It is free. It doesn't go. They won't report back to your TPD or GMC. They will not report to anybody. What are the things they help you with? Stress, anxiety, burnout, addiction problems, and more importantly, this is less talked about sort of problems, domestic violence, because some people don't understand they moved into a new country, new culture, and the rules and norms are different here. So a lot of this they can support you with. A brief about driving. Driving is a key and important element. You need to have stayed in the UK for 185 days before you can attempt theory test. So you just need to plan it, make sure you find out good local drivers. You can so you can take some practical lessons. You can drive on your international driving license if you have one for up to a year from the day you enter the UK. So enter the UK for the first time. But I would advise caution because it is quite challenging. You probably might not be aware of the rules and regulations. You need a valid insurance, and there are speed cameras everywhere. And every year I will have one registrar who get themselves into trouble with that. Next slide, please. So the important people who are around you, number one is your educational supervisor. So most of you will have a named educational supervisor who will stay with you for the 3-year full-time equivalent duration of your training. So invest in this relationship early on. I cannot overstate the value of this. I've been a trainer for the last 12 years. I've got a very good relationship with all my trainees. I act as their advocate. I usually look after my registrars as a pastoral role. Also, I'm the early warning system. So if somebody is not writing educated note, I usually send them a message to say, are you all right? Is everything going well? So you need to have that relationship. And if your educational supervisor is sending you a message, don't feel it as a threat. They're just sort of nudging you and checking in on you. So it's important to get that relationship. Number two, your reception staff, admin staff, whether in a secondary care hospital, whether in a community setting, whether in your GP surgery, they're the most important asset for you. They are your local intelligence. They can tell you which area you need to avoid renting or buying a house. They can tell you about a patient. If you go in on a home visit, they probably can give a hint how easy or difficult it is to find that house. And more importantly, at the end of 4 months or 6 months, when you need an MSF, if you had a relationship with them, probably they're going more likely to complete your MSF. Your medical defense organizations. So most faculties across 4 nations provide medical defense membership free of cost, but it's important you sign up and you register with the link. Don't miss the link. If you are not protected, you're not registered, if you get into trouble, then defense organizations cannot support you with any complaints, medical legal queries, especially coroner's inquest and things like that. I know vast majority of you will never contact them, but there's less than 1% who get into some form of difficulty. When they do need that support, it is available. They're impartial, they're brilliant. So please don't miss that opportunity. Make sure you register, you find out how to register with a medical defense organization as one of your priorities. I am a BMM member, so I don't have any vested interest. Definitely worth becoming a member. As a registrar, the maximum you would pay is around £32. It's tax deductible, so it will cost you around £25. It's based on number of years post qualification. So some of you might pay 20 quid, some of you might pay £32 or something like that. I know somebody from BMA might be talking a bit later. They're very good with advising you on employment support, legal advice, contracts, rotas, pay queries. They're genuinely helpful. The other important organization which probably you need to consider, maybe there might be a small payment for it, your diaspora medical societies. BAPIO is a very well-known overseas Indian Doctors Association. They've done a lot of good work, including challenging unfairness in the RCGP exams, and that has brought some changes. I know there is a Nigerian Doctors Association, there's an Egyptian Doctors Association, and Pakistani Physician Association. Worth investing time with those organizations, very helpful in terms of social network, getting some support. Sylvia has already mentioned the importance of joining your local faculty. It's very important for network. South Yorkshire and North Trent faculty, we usually have an IMG sort of a welcome event, free food. Maybe you just have to give up a couple of hours of your evening, so be aware of it. One of the key and most important things, freedom to speak up guardian. If you're not aware of the concept, so each trust will have a freedom to speak up guardian. Any microaggression, bullying, racism concerns, you need to contact your freedom to speak up guardian. It is confidential. Your identity can be protected even if you raise concerns. They can give you impartial advice, and they can also take action if the nature of the concerns are quite serious. And each trust, usually it will be a consultant. There will be a guardian of safe working. So if you end up working longer hours, and if nobody's taking over your bleep when you're supposed to finish at 5 o'clock, and if you end up working till 8 o'clock, you need to contact guardian of safe working. They can make sure you're protected and make sure these things does not happen going forward. Next slide, please. Few important sort of networking and well-being groups. So most training programs, they might have peer WhatsApp groups. Worth engaging with those groups, especially if you have a dedicated IMG. Usually it tends to be a deanery-wide one. Worth engaging with those. So they might be able to sort of give you insights in terms of where to go and pray, where is your local halal butcher, where can you find specialist food shops and things like that. Most deaneries, most programs do offer buddy trainee. So this might be a trainee in ST2 or ST3. They can mentor you with e-portfolio and also support you with the transition, and they might also give you some insight into lived experience. So if offered, make sure you use it. If you're struggling with e-portfolio or not understand how the training works, it's worth asking your training program director. Your lead employer, I presume most of you are aware who your lead employer is, because they probably would have already completed all your pre-employment checks, or they might be in the process of completing it. So they've got several functions, and one of the key function is to support your well-being, and also occupational health support. And most of the lead employer website, you can self-refer yourself for well-being and also occupational health support if required. They can monitor your rota compliance. They can monitor EDI requirements at the workplace. They can provide advice and signpost you where you can access neurodiversity support, bereavement support, support for domestic abuse. As I said, the key function, one of their key function is occupational health. Again, this occupational health support includes when somebody is returning post-maternity leave or more than 12 weeks of sickness absence. They exist, so be aware of those services in East Midlands. They're called a supported return to work. They can enroll you for one-day CPD courses free of cost, so that transition back to work after a period of absence could be very well supported back into training. So PSU or PSW, that's Professional Support and Wellbeing Services. The previous speakers have highlighted regarding neurodiversity support. They have got several functions according to their own website. They provide short-term solution-focused intervention for doctors and dentists in training who are experiencing difficulty in progressing with their training. The support is confidential and impartial. Engagement with PSW support is viewed as excellent. It's not a negative, or they won't send a report back to your TPDs or anything like that. They would just say they're engaging with PSW. And that is a good evidence in terms of your insight into any problems. And it also meets the GMC professional standards. So if anybody offers you PSW support, don't hesitate. It's a good thing. Please access it. They can provide you one-to-one counseling, coaching. They can provide you study support, dyslexia screening, full cognitive assessments. They can also signpost for occupational health referrals. Again, your educational supervisor can refer. You can self-refer as well. Speaking personally as a TPD, the most common reason I refer a trainee to PSW early on would be for linguistic and communication support. This is to soften the communication style to meet the UK consultation standards. Later on in ST2 or ST3, following exam failure or something like that, it's purely for neurodiversity assessment and also exam coaching support. Next slide, please. So hopefully, if everything goes well, I'm probably looking, you're already in ST2. So this is the time for you to look out and seek out for role models. So the role models can be your buddy trainee, if you have one, your educational supervisor, your TPD, or people in the RCGP, IMG leads, or your faculty leads. So you just have to seek out people who have similar journey to you, or their journey looks similar to you, who have succeeded. So probably role modeling would really benefit you. And also do not underestimate the challenges of the MRCGP examinations. Again, the key is planning. Most of you would be using a 14 Fish. 14 Fish has got an AKT package. It costs around £95. Worth investing early on, that £95 can be claimed back from your educational budget. That probably would help you to understand what are the key topics you need to focus on. And the main problem with exams, why international medical graduates struggle with exams, is purely because they struggle to apply the knowledge they have into clinical practice, and that's where the problem lies. Next slide, please. So once you have adjusted to the new country, the new culture, the UK culture, NHS, understand the ins and outs, probably you will be in your ST3 years. This is probably the time for you to look around and put yourself forward for any sort of leadership activities, which might include being an ST2 or an ST3 rep for your program, nominating yourself as an LMC GP trainee rep or RCGP faculty trainee rep. So those are the things which probably would be helpful. I probably wouldn't do it before that because you still got a lot of challenges to go through, navigate through. Next slide, please. So to sum it up, I've based my talk around the principles of Maslow's hierarchies of need. You'll only excel in your training once all your basic needs are met: your housing, health, finances, safety, and belonging. Once you pass those 3 levels, then your esteem and self-actualization will come, where you can excel in your training. So get the foundations right and the excellence will follow. So don't worry if you're lagging behind a little bit, and if you compare to your peers, you feel, oh, I'm not where I need to be. Things will come, but you just need to understand that's not because of any deficiencies or not because you're good. It's purely because of cultural transition. We know you are good because you've gone through all the exams, and that's why you're here. So my closing message is, your educational supervisor, if you are offered a buddy trainee, your practice team, your lead employer, professional support and well-being unit, BMA membership, your medical defense organization, your diaspora society, your RCGP faculty, your guardians, i.e. your training program directors. I'm a training program director, so I have a cohort of registrars who I take care of. I should be your first port of call if you try to resolve your problem through your contacts or your networks, and if you're still not getting anywhere, your TPD should be your final port of call to help and support you. And we hold a pastoral role, and it's important for you all to contact you. The people I mentioned, they're around, they're all here to support you and make sure you succeed. Our intentions are to make sure you succeed, you enjoy your training. Use them early, don't hesitate. There's nothing wrong in asking the question. There's nothing called the wrong question or wrong question. So enjoy your training And if you have any questions, please pop it on. I might be around till 1 o'clock, and I will answer via the chat. And thank you. Thanks, Amina.
Thank you so much, Naveen. That was so insightful and generated lots of questions that we've been trying to answer in the Q&A. Feel free to add to any of those if you like. And please, everyone continue to use that chat. Naveen is helpfully going to be sticking around to answer some of your questions there. We're now going to be moving on to hear from Chris Hall, who's delivering a presentation from, I think, one of the hot topics that has come up, the medical defense organizations, which is MDU, is the one he will be speaking from. And Chris Hall is the Senior Primary Care Liaison Manager for the Northwest of England at the Medical Defence Union, MDU. With over 15 years' experience working in primary care, Chris has extensive knowledge of the challenges faced by GPs and practice teams, particularly in relation to medical indemnity and medical legal risk. In his role, Chris works closely with GPs and practices across the Northwest, providing guidance on indemnity arrangements and supporting members with their professional needs. So I hope some of your questions you've been asking will be answered in his talk. Over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. I'm just going to share my screen now. If you could just let me know if you can see that okay. Is that showing up for everyone?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So really nice to see you all. It's a pleasure to present to you today. And just like to sort of wish you, congratulations on all your roles and wishing you all the best in the future. And hopefully this will give you some good tips. I've heard some of the sessions today really helpful. So hopefully I can continue that trend. And I'm speaking on behalf of the MDU, the Medical Defence Union, and so we're one of the main defence organisations, and members tend to call us when things go wrong, in terms of things like patient complaints. It can be negligence claims. We help members a lot with things like GMC investigations, with coroner's inquiries, helping them write reports to the coroner, attending inquests, that kind of thing. But one thing that we do always urge our members is that you don't have to wait until something goes wrong before you contact us. If ever you're worried about potentially something going wrong, do call the advisory team, because they're always happy to hear from you, and they'd much rather you contact them in advance. And prevention is obviously better than cure. And so what I'm going to present to you today is a few sort of cautionary tales. So these are just a few sort of scenarios that we're going to have a quick look at, and they're just based around some of the common pitfalls that we see from a medico-legal perspective in medicine. So where we sort of tend to see complaints arising from, significant events, claims, GMC investigations, that sort of thing. But hopefully, there'll be a sort of a reassuring theme throughout this, that most things can be cleared up, with support from your colleagues and your defence organisations before they sort of, escalate. So we're going to show you a little bit of the GMC guidance throughout as well, just to support the information and the advice that we give. And as I said, hopefully it will just give you a little bit more confidence that when you are faced with a situation, you'll be able to tackle it. So the ones that we're going to look at that I picked out, which I thought might be useful, are on confidentiality, consent, one on social media, and then we're going to look at a complaint. So we're going to look at a patient complaint, and then we're going to look at a good and not so good way to answer that complaint. So for anyone that has been faced with a complaint, hopefully this will be helpful. And for anyone that hasn't yet had a complaint, it will give you some confidence, because unfortunately, it's fairly inevitable that everybody will be faced with a complaint at some point in their career, not necessarily reflective of your standard of care that you provide. It can just be things that you get dragged into, or sometimes it's just not the outcome that the patient wanted, despite your best efforts. So just to kick things off, so we have this slide in a lot of the presentations that we use. We call it the multiple jeopardy slide. It can be a little bit of a scary slide because it just shows some of the multiple avenues that can arise out of a clinical incident. So something goes wrong, and then patients have an option to pursue the incident in different ways, or various different investigations can spring from that incident. So things like a civil claim, so that would be someone wanting compensation as a result of a feeling of sort of that negligence has been done, or some kind of maladministration or service failure resulting in sort of hardship. It could be deemed as a criminal act. So we have an in-house legal team that deals with accusations of criminal activity on behalf of members. So it could be something like an accusation of sexual assault during a routine intimate examination. It could be an accusation of gross negligence, manslaughter, something like that. Obviously, these are quite rare, but it can happen. Then you've got things like disciplinary investigations. You've got NHS complaints. So that's a complaint that comes in locally to the practice. You've got the GMC. And then you've got things like the coroner, which I mentioned earlier. You've got the CQC, who can do inspections of a practice as a result of an incident that's occurred. And sometimes as well, unfortunately, certain sort of cases that a doctor might be involved in can attract some media attention as well. So you've got to be mindful of that. We have a press office at the MDU that handles media inquiries on behalf of patients if you are ever faced with something like that. I'm also just going to note, I've just noticed in the Q&A about sort of being registered with the MDU and things like that and extended for GP Trainees. I'm going to go into that at the end, just a little bit about sort of indemnity and how it all works. So I hope that's helpful, just as a quick 5 minutes at the end. So let's dive into the first scenario. So the first one is on confidentiality, which is quite a common area where people sort of fall down. So if you want to just take a minute to have a read of this scenario. And then if you want just to put some of your sort of thoughts in the Q&A about perhaps how you would think about handling this sort of scenario. So if anyone has any sort of thoughts on how you perhaps want to tackle this. So it's regarding a deceased patient, and it's the daughter, and she's wanting copies of the records. So I'll just bring up the next slide just while people are sort of having a think about it, just in the interest of time. So some of the things to perhaps just get you thinking about would be, does the duty of confidentiality apply to deceased patients? Because we all know that living patients have rights of confidentiality, and obviously it's a foundation of good clinical care. There's an ethical duty. There's also a legal duty. You'll sign a confidentiality clause in your contracts when you're working to make sure that you keep patient information confidential. But does that change when the patient passes away? So have a think about that. Also, does the Data Protection Act apply? So we know that applies for living patients. Does that extend to deceased patients? And can you discuss the death without disclosing the records as well? So is there any way of maybe talking about or providing information to this person without perhaps divulging any confidential information? So let's have a look then at the next bit of information. So confidentiality does extend beyond the death of the patient. However, there is certain things where you should disclose information if you're compelled to do so by a public body, such as a court or the coroner, for instance. So the coroner asks you for information. You don't need sort of consent from a family member or anything like that. You should abide by those requests. The actual legislation that covers deceased patients is the Access to Health Records Act of 1990. So it's not the Data Protection Act. So it's separate legislation. And that gives rights of access to the records to a deceased person's personal representative. So that would normally be someone called the executor. And they would normally have been the power of attorney during while the patient was alive. And then they become the executor. So they have an unqualified right of access to the records. So if they ask you, they don't need to actually give you a reason for why they're requesting the information. But also, there might be other people that are close to the patient that aren't the executor, aren't the personal representative. So you would need to think about whether it was okay to actually provide that confidential information to the other people as well. So access can be limited or refused. So not everybody has a right of access to the information. And things I think that you need to consider as well. So we can bring in the GMC guidance in this. So this is their guidance on confidentiality, specifically about deceased patients. And it highlights the factors that you should consider before disclosing information about a deceased patient. So it includes things like, that you consider the views that the patient would have expressed when they were alive. So they would have said, look, I don't want this information, to be discussed with anyone other than, say my eldest son or something like that. Then you would normally do your best to abide by those wishes. You've also got to think about whether disclosing information would be likely to cause any sort of distress or be of benefit to the patient's partner or family. Whether the disclosure would also disclose information about a patient's family. So if there's any sort of third-party information in there that shouldn't then be shared. Is the information already public knowledge, or can it be anonymized or de-identified? And what's the actual reason for the disclosure? So I think you should always, if someone asks for the records, it's always about, well, what is it exactly that you want, and why do you want it? What are the reasons? Because then if you do decide to actually release the information, you're only providing the information that's relevant. You're not just giving them absolutely everything. So just in terms of the outcome of this one, let's have a look then. So having spoken with her, the doctor accepted that the daughter really didn't understand what had happened to her father. So the doctor checked the records for evidence that the father would not have wanted the daughter to know any information, and didn't find any of that information in there. They explained that they'd have to check with the personal representative about the release of records, but as an alternative, happy to talk through things in general with the daughter to ease her concerns. So they gave a general explanation of events, perhaps, what happens in terms of how that sort of particular disease progresses in general terms, without discussing any sort of specifics to the father. And the daughter was happy with that explanation. And I think, in this sort of particular scenario, and this is something that you might see quite frequently, where perhaps a family member isn't particularly involved in the care of the patient in the lead up to their death. Perhaps they were living abroad or away. And then there's a little bit of sort of maybe guilt or part of the grieving process that kicks in, where they start, they want answers and they want to know more information. And that's absolutely completely understandable. But in this particular case, they were able to sort of talk through that with the patient without actually disclosing any confidential information. So it's just a good example, I think, of how you navigate some of these challenges. And obviously, the personal representative would need to be consulted if there was still a persistent request for, a copy of the records or specific information within the records. So that's the confidentiality one, just to get us warmed up. So the next one that I'm going to talk about is on consent, and I just thought it'd be useful to just give you a bit more information around consent. So this is a Department of Health definition of consent there. And we're talking about not just consent, so not just a patient saying yes, but actually valid and informed consent. So that should be given, the key words here, voluntarily. They should be informed, so have all the information that they need to make that decision. They should have capacity, so soundness of mind, the ability to make that decision, reason with the options, the pros and cons, retain the information. They should be giving that information voluntarily and freely, so without any sort of pressure, coercion, undue influence being exerted on them. Okay, so that's I think quite a good sort of starting point in terms of what consent actually is. And of course, the importance of consent is it's an essential factor in good clinical care. It's based on the ethical principle of autonomy or bodily autonomy, that every individual has the right to decide what happens to their own body. It's a legal requirement, and it's a GMC expectation that that patients should be able to make a decision as long as they have capacity, and even if it's deemed as an unwise decision, they have the right to make that decision. So just a little bit more on that, and I think some quite useful quotes around this. So if you look at the first quote there from 1914, so this is talking about sort of bodily autonomy, that every adult of sound mind has the right to determine what should be done with their body. A surgeon who performs an operation without the patient's consent commits an assault. This was actually a court case in the early 1900s in New York, where a surgeon removed a malignant tumor from the uterus of a patient, but that patient had specifically not given their consent to have that removed, but the surgeon disregarded the wishes of the patients. And it was that, I suppose that sort of old-fashioned paternalistic approach of, well, the doctor knows better than the patient, and therefore, even if the patient doesn't want something to happen, if the doctor feels it should be done, then they're going to do it. And obviously, that changed in that case. And then, just to put it quite bluntly, from the legal perspective, the only difference between the surgeon and a mugger with a knife is the consent of the patient. So I think that just quite starkly summarizes what we're trying to say there. So let's have a look at the scenario then for this one. So just take a minute to have a read of this one and just have a think about it. So you've got a patient here, and I think so. Sometimes this can be perhaps a bit more common with perhaps more elderly patients, where they want you to sort of just take charge and just get things done for them. So look, I just don't want all the information. I just want you to get it done. So thinking about your options here. So what should the doctor do now? So just get you considering about perhaps some of the answers that you give here. And I think, don't underestimate how often this can actually happen. Because like I said, with perhaps more elderly patients as well, they're perhaps looking for a more of a paternalistic approach to the way that they're treated. And how do you deal with a patient who declines to receive any information at all? And could you go ahead with any sort of procedure or medication or anything like that? So just to remember, for consent to be valid, the patient must understand what they're consenting to. So even if they say, look, I'm happy for you to get on with it, just do it, but I don't want any information, that's not really going to cut the mustard, unfortunately. So just bringing again the GMC guidance into this one. If they don't want to discuss details, you've got to explain that actually we do need to give you a basic, at least, a minimum amount of information so that you can make an informed decision. So things like whether the procedure is invasive, what level of pain or discomfort they might experience, what they should do to prepare. Is there any sort of risks associated with any sort of procedure? Okay. You should also try and find out why they don't want to be involved in any decision making. Can you explore the reasons for that? So let's have a look then at the next slide here. So, yeah, so why have they adopted that position? Have they had a difficult previous experience? Are they worried about what might happen? I think if you can get to the bottom of perhaps why they don't want that information, it might help you to then speak to them and reason with them about, look, we do need to have that conversation so that I can record it, so that you're going in with with your eyes wide open, and we might not actually be able to continue with the procedure or the medication or whatever it is without having that discussion. So I think with that sort of objection, there's probably a bit of time spent in terms of communicating, building up a rapport with the patients, and that relationship, so that they're more trusting of you and they're more likely then to share that information and any concerns and fears that they might have, and then you can sort of find a way forward to progress with whatever needs to be done. So that's the consent one there. So it's really just important to make sure that you document consenting patients. Because we do see, cases at the MDU where patients might say, I wasn't warned of some information, although, a procedure was done, I wasn't given all of the information necessary, and I perhaps wouldn't have made that decision if I'd have been told that information. We also get it sometimes with things around intimate examinations, and where perhaps a chaperone wasn't present as well, and patients have misinterpreted information given to them, or perhaps misinterpreted the procedures, the intimate examinations, as being inappropriate because it wasn't explained very well, and that sort of informed consent wasn't gathered initially and wasn't recorded. And that's then sometimes quite a sticky situation for the doctor to be in, where it's the patient's word against theirs, and there's not enough in the records to determine whether that informed consent was actually obtained with the patients. I can just see here someone's put a question in about time pressure. Yeah, and in providing a patient information leaflet. So can this be considered as an informed decision? I think giving a patient information leaflet is helpful and useful, but I wouldn't necessarily say it is a gold standard informed consent, because how can you know for sure that the patient is going to read that information and understand that information? So just giving them a leaflet without any sort of dialogue, without any sort of conversation, I think you're leaving yourself a little bit open there to potential criticism if ever there was an incident that occurred from that interaction. So I think I would view the patient information leaflet as more of a supplementation to that consenting process, but really you need to make sure you're having a dialogue with the patient. And I appreciate that's difficult sometimes with the time constraints that you have, but just making sure that the patient understands the information you're giving them. Have they got any questions, any concerns, giving them the opportunity to raise those. So yes, do use the leaflets, but not as a standalone, in addition to the sort of dialogue that you're having. So that's the consent scenario. So just sort of whizzing through them now. So the next one is on social media. I just brought this one in because we're seeing an increasing amount of, obviously social media is very widely used now. And sometimes, professional boundaries can be blurred in that sort of social media setting. So let's just have a look at this particular scenario here. So, quite a distressing message to receive, and through Facebook as well. So someone, and that's something to bear in mind as well, that actually sometimes people that are not on your friends list, if you do have an account on something like Facebook, I believe that there is a way that people can actually still message you directly through Facebook, the sort of messenger service, without actually being linked to you, without being a sort of a friend, which is potentially quite worrying. But I think there's certain things that you can do to lock that down in your account settings. So it might be worth thinking about having a look at your account settings. If you do have an account, what information can people gather about you on social media as well? And certainly from myself speaking to GPs all over my area, quite a number of them have had things like friend requests or had direct messages from patients to their sort of Facebook accounts. So just something to be aware of. So our advice on this, and I think that while this case overlaps with perhaps more general criticism on social media, I think the fact that the feedback is sent to the doctor personally via a private message is, it perhaps involves, obviously it involves some serious allegations. It raises some additional challenges, and certainly the first piece of advice would be to not in any way engage with that sender directly. So don't respond to the message or in any way, and instead, that should be it should be treated as a complaint within the practice. So it should be passed to the practice to investigate and respond to. I think also think about taking screenshots and making sure that you are blocking that person from being able to message you again. As I said, make the practice aware. And then you would also perhaps, acknowledge, and it would perhaps be the practice that would do this. They would acknowledge, and ideally they would explain that the route chosen to raise that grievance was inappropriate, and that the complainant had been blocked from messaging further, just to set expectations that they shouldn't message in that way again, because it won't be seen and it won't be responded to. And then the person who had, the direct message sent to them, they should obviously contribute to the investigation. It might be that the practice decides to form a view on whether to send a separate warning letter to the patient, just to sort of say that it's inappropriate to actually, to contact an individual GP in that manner. And yeah, as I said before as well, just think about your privacy settings on any sort of social media accounts that you do have. I know a lot of doctors change their names slightly on their social media accounts so that they can't easily be searched by patients, for instance. I think also just thinking about things like private messaging groups. So the GMC notably includes things like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. They include that as social media, because I think when you think about social media, you tend to think of Facebook, Instagram, etc., rather than the private messaging services. But actually, the GMC, that it includes those messaging services within that sort of social media sphere. And there has been, doctors criticised for their use of those messaging groups in the past, where they perhaps shared things that are racist or inappropriate, and they've said, well, look, it's a private group. I've not been sharing it with anyone who wouldn't. But then someone has shared that with the GMC. The GMC is seeing it as being, a fall in acceptable professional standards for the individual. So just be really careful about things that you're sort of sharing on those private groups. Also things like, forums, doctors' forums and things. I know there's a lot of those on Facebook, and perhaps, it can be quite cathartic to share perhaps experiences that you've had in practice. But obviously it's really important that if you are going to do that, that it can't be identifiable for any patients, because I've heard of certain cases where they one doctor did a PSA score top trumps game. So they said, "Oh, I've had a PSA score today from a patient of this amount. Has anyone got a higher one?" And as it happens, another doctor on that group recognised that score as being their father's score that they'd had a test that week. And when they looked at the doctor's name, they found that actually they were a GP at their father's practice. So it was identifiable as their father's score. So, who'd have thought that that could happen? And the doctor probably thought it was just a bit of fun and it wouldn't be identifiable, but actually it was in that case. So just be really careful about making sure that whatever you're sharing on there cannot be identifiable. Okay, so that's social media. I'm going to put a link on in the chat as well at the end. We've got a good article on our website about responding and dealing with online criticism from patients. So I'll put that on in the chat later on. And then just in terms of complaints as well, because as I mentioned before, it is unfortunately fairly inevitable that you will be involved in some form of a complaint at some point in your career, just because of the volume of patients, things not always going to the expectations of the patient. So I've got an example of a complaint now that I want you to just have a quick read of. It's a nice short one, fortunately. We are seeing a lot more complaints now that members are sending in to us to help them to respond that have been done by AI. So the patient sort of puts, a summary of their grievance into something like ChatGPT. ChatGPT then provides this very sophisticated looking, very long letter that then is sent to the practice. So if you do have any of those as well, do contact us and we can help you to respond to it in the best possible way. So with this one, it's a complaint about having to wait, isn't it? So a delay with the doctor waiting over an hour, and then also, it's quite confrontational in its tone, isn't it, as well, and threatening. So, and I think, some of the emotions that you can go through when you receive a complaint, understandably, you can go through quite a lot of negative emotions. And some of them, you can feel quite angry sometimes, because quite often it's when you have done your absolute best to help a patient, then they make a complaint. And it can be, quite anger inducing. It can be very frustrating as well. It can also create feelings of worry and anxiousness. So a lot of negative connotations with receiving complaints. And I think, with something like this, it can be quite tempting to write quite a confrontational letter back to the patient to put them back in their place. And we have had to deal with the fallout of that from members in the past, where they've got very emotionally involved in the response. They've written it in the heat of the moment and sent it out to the patient, and it's made the situation 10 times worse. So I think if you do need to write a response of that nature, it might make you feel better temporarily. That's fine. Just make sure it's shredded or destroyed and it can't possibly be sent back out to the patients. And then take a few deep breaths and think about how you're going to write a proper response. So the example of that, I've got a good example of that, of an unwise response that you can see here now. So normally everyone gives everyone a wry smile, this one, and think, wouldn't it be great to send that out to a patient? Might make you feel better for a few minutes. Is that going to de-escalate that complaint? No. Is it going to satisfy the patient? No. Is it going to create more work for you in the long run? Absolutely yes, because the patient is going to complain again. And with that multiple jeopardy slide that I showed you at the beginning, a lot of the time, incidents that happen, they start off as a local complaint to the practice. And that's a great opportunity to then de-escalate the situation by providing a really thorough, reasoned response. If you don't do that, and you inflame the situation, the patient is more likely then to perhaps take it to the ombudsman. They could complain directly about you to the GMC, for instance. So there's lots of other avenues that they might go down if they feel that, if they feel dissatisfied with the response that you've provided to the local complaint. So that's not how not to do it. So now we're going to look at the way that you should think about responding. And initially, you would acknowledge a patient complaint. So this isn't a full response. This is just to say that you've received the complaint and that you're going to respond to them, and you would provide a time scale for that. And that you set your time scale according to the challenge that you'll have of getting that response done. So if it's a very, very complex complaint, it spans multiple clinicians, it might span primary and secondary care, it's going to take a lot of time to coordinate a response. So you would set your timescale accordingly, rather than if it was something quite straightforward. So now we're going to look at the response from the measured practice. So a good response. So normally you would start it off with a summary of the patient's complaint, which has been done here. And then this final paragraph here. So I'm very sorry that you didn't have a good experience, and I'm very grateful that you brought it to my attention. So we call that wording sad but glad. And that's a sort of tone. It's that conciliatory tone that you want to be thinking about. So it's sad but glad. I'm very sad that you've had to complain, that you've not had a good experience, but I'm very glad that you brought it to my attention so that we could do something about it. We can make improvements to the service. So that's the sort of the approach that you want to go at. So that's quite a good introduction, I think. Then you would explain what you've done to look into the complaints. So obviously looked at computer records there, discussed with the GP, and also discussed at a significant event meeting to see if any lessons can be learned. So I think that's always great to show the patient that you're taking it seriously by discussing it with colleagues in a meeting as well. The next bit is you give the facts from the practice's point of view. So yeah, just take a minute to have a read of this. But what you're doing is you're doing it in a factual manner, in a non-confrontational manner. So you can see there that actually the patient wasn't waiting over an hour, were they? They came in 15 minutes early for their appointments, and then they were called in at 11:32. So they were actually only waiting for 32 minutes, which the practice has stated, but they've not done it in a sort of, we're right, you're wrong sort of way. They've done it in a purely sort of factual, non-confrontational way. I also think it's good that, they've put in an apology in there as well, because an apology can be a very powerful thing, even though perhaps it's a bit more difficult sometimes if you don't feel you've done anything wrong, isn't it? That why should I apologize? But actually, I would see always an apology as more of an expression of empathy rather than sort of an admission of any sort of liability or negligence. So you can say, look, I'm very sorry that you didn't have a good experience. I'm very sorry that this didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. I think that's a really powerful thing that you can do in complaint responses and when you're speaking to patients face to face or over the phone as well. Also, some good learning points there as well about reminding our reception staff there. So I think overall, I think that's an effective complaint response. And I think if the patient said that they were unhappy and wanted to take it further, say to the ombudsman, I don't think there would be really a case to answer there. I think it would be a justified response that, so the complaint wouldn't be upheld and it wouldn't go any further. And hopefully the patient would actually be satisfied with that. So as I mentioned earlier, there can be some negative connotations with complaints. Try not to get too emotionally involved. Take a deep breath, get support from your colleagues. They'll be able to support you, and call your defence organisation like us as well, because we can help you to draft the best possible response back to the patients to make sure it de-escalates, it diffuses the situation. And sometimes, I think having that positive approach towards complaints is really useful because it's a way of learning. It's showing reflection and insight, which are all positive things for for your portfolios, for your feedback, and all of those sorts of things as well. And hopefully, it's going to improve patient care as well. Patients generally want these things when they complain. They want an explanation as to what's happened, and they want to feel listened to. They want to be taken seriously. An apology, improvements to the service. So in terms of what they don't want, well, it's the opposite really, isn't it? So they don't want you to deny that it happened or for it to be trivialized. They don't want you to place blame on them. Making excuses rather than actually looking at the real reason for what went wrong. And multiple procedural stages, I suppose, would be, putting obstacles in the way of allowing the patient to complain, so making it very difficult for them to raise any sort of concerns. So just have those in the back of your mind as well. So just a summary of those sort of cases, really, I think, make sure you keep good records, good documentation, claims, complaints, all those sorts of things can be notified quite long periods of time after the incident. So you're never going to remember what you discussed, what you agreed with patients. So the better the records, the better the chance of successfully defending and justifying actions that you've taken. Do contact us as early as possible, get advice, get ahead of the situation if at all possible. And then just really quickly, just a little bit on medical indemnity. So you'll be aware that there is NHS indemnity, and then there are defence organisations such as the MDU. So just to let you know that state indemnity or NHS indemnity is purely for claims of clinical negligence. So on that multiple jeopardy slide that I showed earlier, that is when someone sues for negligence. So if that happens and it arises out of your NHS work, you would go to NHS Resolution, the clinical negligence scheme for GPs. However, that is all that state indemnity provides. So for anything else, that's where you contact your medical defence organisation. So if it's a local complaint that comes into the practice, if it goes to the ombudsman, if it's a GMC investigation, and you might need help with supporting evidence or legal representation, so things like barristers and things like that, if you have to go to a hearing. Also, coroner's inquiries, providing a report to the coroner or legal representation at an inquest. All of these things, as well as 24 hours, 7-day-a-week medical legal advice that's manned always by fellow doctors to provide advice to you as well. So that's just the sort of difference between state indemnity and then the gaps that leaves. And that's why, obviously, medical defence organisations, are very much needed to fill those gaps. And then just a little bit about, so someone mentioned about your deanery and things. So you'll have a deanery approved defence cover. And now we don't actually have the contract for that in England. It was put out to tender, and unfortunately we didn't get that contract. So what we actually have is a free affiliate membership for any GP trainees in England. We also have a GPST membership for anyone outside of England. So for anyone in Wales, Scotland, or Ireland. And I'll put the links up in a minute. So I'm just going to put I'll put the information in the chat in a second. But this free affiliate membership actually gives you access to an organisation called Red Whale, which are a fantastic educational provider, and they give you free access to Red Whale knowledge. So all the sort of CPD that you do, all of those things, it links directly with 14 Fish as well. There's over 900 written resources which you can access. There's also an AKT digital handbook as well, which is fantastic for helping anyone that has the AKT coming up. And that's throughout your training that you get access to that Red Whale package. So that's always for the whole 3 years or however long that you're training for. So yeah, it's not mandatory to register with the MDU. Someone's just asked, because you do have a deanery indemnity, but I would recommend that you do it because it's completely free. And you get access to this Red Whale package, which normally is quite expensive actually to purchase yourselves. So you can get access to all the educational resources, which could be really helpful for consultation support and also for passing exams and things like that. So thank you very much for listening. Oh, I'm just there's another question here as well. So if you joined the MDU later than when the coroner's case started and you're facing criticism, can you still assist, or is there an additional support network that you can offer legal advice? So generally, with all the defence organisations, we operate on what's called occurrence-based indemnity. So that means that you would, if something happened previously, you would go back and contact the organisation that you were a member of at the time. There might be some situations where a defence organisation can consider retrospectively covering as well, but that would be on a sort of a case-by-case basis. But normally you would contact the organisation that you were a member at the time of. Okay, there's another question there, but I don't think that one is for me. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time, Chris. That was
No
really
problem.
insightful. And as you rightly said, so many questions in the Q&A on this. It's a big topic to demystify, I think. We are due to go on a little break now, but if there are any other questions in the Q&A, Chris, are you happy to stick around just to answer those for us? But otherwise, if you all want to take another 5-minute breather and comfort break, then please be back again for 2 minutes past 1, and we will see you for our final segment. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I will let you all come filtering back through to get started and then soon to wrap up. So we will now be hearing from Dr. Mustafa Abdullah, who will provide some take-home messages from his journey as an IMG GP and the many other hats that he wears. Dr. Mustafa Abdullah is a salaried GP in Portsmouth, a deputy clinical lead of the New to Practice Fellowship Programme in Hampshire and Isle of Wight, and IMG co-lead on the RCGP Wessex Faculty Board. He's an experienced educator with a particular interest in supporting newly qualified GPs and international medical graduates through education, mentoring, and professional development. I'm sure he'll have lots of useful insights for you all to wrap up the day. Thank you, Mustafa. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Amina. Can I initially ask, are you able to see my screen and hear me well?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. So thank you so much for organizing this day, Dr. Amina, and for asking me to join this wonderful day. And good afternoon, everyone, my colleagues. I'm pretty sure you have listened to many sessions during the morning, and you have very interesting thoughts about what you are going to have through your training. I even joined late and listened to the MDU sessions, which I think is very important to understand how to deal with complaints. But now I would like to give you some take-home messages. To be honest, me and Dr. Amina, we tried to think what is the name of these sessions, and we make it as a take-home messages, but I would prefer to say this is my thoughts to help you in your start of your journey at GP Registrars. So, as Amina introduced me, my name is Mustafa Abdullah. I'm a salaried GP in Portsmouth, in addition to other roles that I'm doing. But let me first start by asking you, who are you? To introduce yourself. So, I think for me, when I'm looking to GP registrars starting their training, you are a group of successful jockeys that have been winning all through your career till now. So you have passed the exam at your medical schools and then other exams to join the GMC registrations. You applied to the GMC either through a foundational training or through training from abroad, and you proved that you are a good doctor. You even signed several types of form like the CREST form or the foundational form to show that you are capable of being registrars. You then take the MSRA exam and you got score higher than many colleagues to be here. And in addition to that, as an international medical graduate, he even managed to be with us by passing many non-medical challenges like visa relocations, many of you either leaving part of your family back home or bringing your family with you from home. So you have been successful in all your career and you are ready now to go to the next stage. And that's take me to, why are you here? So why are you having GB training? Generally speaking, you are here because you want to be trained to be a GB. But at the same time, having a training program is because UK wants more qualified GB. So we have an increasing pressure in the primary care, and we need more GPs to be helped to help our patients to reach to a diagnosis and to make the NHS work. And that's why the training come in place. So the training aim to guide you to achieve a common goal between you to become a GB and the whole system that wants you to be a good and capable qualified GB. And the Royal College sets the standard for this goal. Now, why I'm speaking, why I'm giving these thoughts. It's time to introduce myself. Basically, I'm an international medical graduate. I'm the one who walked this path before you. I have witnessed the challenges. I have tried to ask for help, to get more information. I was totally new to the system when I started. So basically, I'm an Egyptian. I was graduated in Alexandria University in 2010, worked in Egypt for 2 years before traveling to Qatar and starting to work as a family medicine resident in Qatar and then a specialist. And then in 2021, decided to move to the UK to train to become a GP. This is me in February 2021 in front of the big hospital in Portsmouth, Queen Alexandra Hospital. And as you can see, having my sunglasses, looks happy. I have 10 years, almost 10 years of experience. What would go wrong? Everything. I have been even working as a family medicine specialist before. So deep inside me, I felt like I know everything. I will bath through it without any problem. But as one of the great Arabic poets say, Al-Mutanabbi, he said, winds blow counter to what ship desires. So basically, I wanted to give you a small story that happened to me when I was in ST1. So I started in February 2021, and I was expecting a baby at this time. My wife was in Egypt, and I planned everything. So I contacted the rota. I see questions about the rota in the chat. So I contacted my rota. I asked it for annual leaves. At this time, we were still in COVID and Egypt was under the red countries. So I needed to book 2 days just to go Egypt, witness the birth of my boy, and then return back, stay in isolations for 10 days before returning to work. Everything set, nothing happened. And I traveled to Egypt and everybody was wishing me all the best to return after 2 weeks. But unfortunately, my son was born with a congenital heart disease, with transposition of great arteries. And that, at this moment, I started to feel like I think my career in the UK has come to an early end. So I joined in February and traveled in Egypt by the end of March. So I just worked for 1 month. Literally, nobody knows me. My educational supervisor, I met only once over Teams meeting and we discussed the plan, but she doesn't know me. Maybe I inserted few entries on my portfolio, but nothing else. The hospital and the HR management, the first things they said, like, what we can offer you. You just very new. You have been in the UK only for 1 month. And deep inside me to choose, do I leave my family and my son who will go to at least 2 surgeries and return back to the UK? To be honest, deep inside me, I said, I cannot leave my son. I think my career has ended in the UK. But I thought deeply and said, why not to ask for help? So in a desperate moment, I just sent an email to my educational supervisor saying, urgent help needed, please. I added in this email everything that I'm going through with my son, all the data that I have, all the echoes and the plan for the surgeries. I sent this email in that day and forgot about it the next second and saying, most probably they will send to me saying, sorry, we cannot do anything to support you. But what happened was completely opposite. What happened was that the education supervisor raised to the training program director, and the training program director raised to the associate dean, and the associate dean started to be my lawyer. She speaks on my behalf with HR, and she started to say, we need to support him. He's in a trouble. We need to figure something. Yes, he is not indicated for a parental leave, but maybe he's indicated for unpaid leave. And then she started to communicate with me. Are we happy with unpaid leave? I said, like, is that possible? Are you still want me to return back? I may take 2 months to return back. She said, Dad, don't worry. Just stay with your son and we work on your behalf. And since that moment, I started to tell all my colleagues that support is available. However, you need to speak up. You need to ask for help. So to be honest, as an international medical graduate myself, and when looking to all my colleagues, we have a problem here. We came to the UK to work as a GP registrar, and we understand that we have a lot of assessment and education supervisor and the clinical supervisors and the ARCP happening. So we try to show our best. And sometimes we try to hide our needs. I will not say it as a weakness. It is usually a need. And with all the support systems that I'm sure my colleagues has told you about it between different part in the deanery, in the Royal College, and even other organizations that are here to support you, the system work well if you speak up, if you said, I need help, please. Needing help doesn't put you at any negative feedback or any negative sensations from your supervisors. It is actually why the training has been created, why all the support system has been created. So we understand as you are a GP registrar, that you will face challenges, and the system can detect some challenges automatically, but many others, it requires you to speak up. So when I remember this event again, and I remember that if I didn't write this email and say, urgent help needed, please, I may not have been sitting here and speaking to you at the moment. But going forward, another thing I would like to take an opportunity to speak about is the support. So you have a route, the training is a route. And this road, you will hear about all the requirements. So you have exam requirement, 2 exams that you need to take. You have the workplace-based assessment, which I will speak about in a second, and many responsibilities during your work, either as a registrar in the hospital or in the primary care. But remember that no matter how the road is, you will never walk alone. There is a whole support system that after going through it, I think this support system is unique to the UK, is unique to the NHS. It may not be present in many other parts of the world. This support system is here to help you, to guide you, to make you reach the common goals that we agreed initially, that we need you to be a good qualified GP who is able to take care of your patients. So there are many things that we can do. You may not know everything. Maybe sometimes the education supervisor may not know everything. And that's why we have a various sources reaching to an associate dean, reaching to the faculty board of the Royal College. And all of this organization, despite looks complicated, they work together to help you. So you are the point that all these organizations work together to give you all the support. So I mentioned about the work-based assessment, and I understand Dr. Amina said, we don't want to speak about 14 fish. There are many things will be covered about 14 fish in the VTS scheme in your training program, and I totally agree with her. The 14 fish, you will hear about this word or the work-based assessment all the time, because this is your third exam. This is the exam that completes the full training besides the AKT and the SCA. But all what I would like to say is keep remembering the 14 fish. So to be honest, I don't know why it's called 14 fish, and that's why I booked this photo of the fish in front of you. But the 14 fish, as I heard from one of the senior colleagues who was actually involved in developing the 14 fish, it looks like a window that the ARCB, the annual reviewing panel, will be able to see your work through it. And the effort that you put to make this window clean and transparent and having all the informations will make the work easier and will make them able to see what you have achieved and even to give an advice about the things that need to work better, either through the panel or through your education supervisor. Because sometimes as an international medical graduates, and when we start to work in the NHS, we focus about being the brilliant doctor, either in the hospital or in the primary care, which is good, which is very good. But without reflecting on that, on the 14 fish, nobody will notice that. So you may have your colleagues in the hospital saying, you have added a lot to the team, you have changed our work, you make our life easier. But without sending them what we call as a multi-source feedback, so they can write even a nice 1 or 2 words in your 14 fish, nobody will know that. So keep remembering that you need to reflect on the 14 fish, that you need to put entries in the 14 fish. Make it a habit, put at least 2 entries every week, and that will make your life much easier. The next thing that I wanted to mention is a clinical day in the life of a GP. Why I would like to bring here in the induction to speak about a clinical day in the life of the GP, because I look to this as the end point. So initially, I don't want you to be panicked, but I was about to show my day for you. It is not intending for the registrar, but this is the end point. This gives the explanations to why we need you to work on the workplace-based assessment, why you need to take the AKT and the SCA, and why all these efforts brought to help you. So I'm not sure if all of you have been in a GB clinic before or worked in a GB clinic, but basically the GB clinic usually is 2 sessions, morning and afternoon session. It's different from one place to another. But for example, my clinical day starting at 6:30, I wake up helping my children to dress for school and then leave to work at 7:45, arrive my surgery at about 7:45, about 8, sorry, and 8:15, and then I start logging in, opening all my computers, start initially for 30 minutes to finish any urgent task, review any urgent documents and blood test, and then between 9 to 12:30, I see 3 same-day telephone consultations, 5 routine face-to-face consultation, and then 3 same-day face-to-face consultations that either booked by the receptions or I have booked myself from the morning calls, and then 3 routine telephone consultation at the end. This is the end of the morning. At 12:30, I then have a rest, take my lunch, and if there is any home visit needed for our patient, I go to do it. Return back at 2:30 to do similar to the morning, another 3 same-day telephone consultations, another 5 routine face-to-face, 3 same-day again to exclude any urgent problem, and then routine telephone consultation at the end. And I finish everything around 5:30, and I spend like 30 minutes if there is any urgent letter need to be done. And finally, it's done, and I return home. So when you look at all these encounters, you will come to your mind the paracetamol doctor. To be honest, I understand that if you haven't been in a GB clinic before, you may have heard this from the media and from many of other sources that loves GB. So paracetamol, you see how many patients you see? 28, you prescribe paracetamol and ibuprofen. I see even some funny doctors and some funny videos on TikTok resembling this paracetamol theory that, yeah, you see 28 patients, patient in 10 to 15 minutes, it's about paracetamol. The ironically is actually, most of the time we don't prescribe paracetamol because it's over the counter, but more important, this is very old. This has completely changed now. So this in the era that the GB was the only one working in the surgery. Currently, we have an extended something called ARRS, or associated helping rules, including advanced nurse practitioners, healthcare assistant, physiotherapists. There are many others. So in the surgery, as a salaried GP, after you finish your training, you are a primary care consultant. You are not just seeing upper respiratory tract infections. You may rarely actually see upper respiratory tract infection. But more often, you will be facing with a challenging cases like this. Like cancer head of the pancreas, presented mainly with unexplained rise in hemoglobin A1C. Metastatic prostate cancer, which present with a low back pain. Tonsillar cancer that she just came and say, oh, I think I have a tonsillitis, but this is for 2 months now. Heart failure, and many others. Most of the cases now have more challenges for you to do and needs more knowledge. And that's why the training is tailored to help with that. If it was only about prescribing paracetamol and prescribing antibiotic for urine infections, your medical school would be enough. But that's completely different now. Statistically, most of the cancer cases that has been diagnosed in the NHS are actually raised by the primary care and diagnosed initially from the primary care. So basically, we are the gatekeepers of the NHS. So any patients who would love to reach a diagnosis, get a secondary care, help, reach any different challenges that help his life to be better, has to come through you. So you are the gatekeepers. And to be the gatekeeper of a huge system like the NHS with many specialties and subspecialties, and now every colleague in the secondary care is focusing on his specific part. So in the ophthalmology, they are subdivided to retina, cornea, and others. In the GIT, they are subdivided into stomach and then liver and then others. You are the only generalist. You are the only generalist consultant who is able to deal with the human being as a human being at all, not as parts and pieces. So last thing I would like to say in my session is the future, because I'm sure you are hearing a lot of talk here and there about future challenges after training. We are not able to find a job, or press saying the GB is not able to find a job after training. And reasonably, that put a lot of fear in your heart. And I wanted to address that, because addressing that helps you to do your best to go to the next. So honestly speaking, before starting, I don't have a magic ball. So I cannot expect, I know it's disappointing, but I cannot say that after 3 years, I promise you everything will be great. And once you finish qualifications, you will find all the job waiting for you. I cannot say that. However, I can deal based on facts. And there are few facts here. The first fact is being a GB is open for you multiple opportunities. So I'm sure you have heard from all our panel today. And if you remember when they introduce themselves, you will rarely find a GB who just working as a GB, which is great. So many of us having other things that we can do. How we reach it to that? We reach it to that initially by finishing our training and by becoming GB, because once you became GB, other opportunities will open. So the GB may appear as a one career, but the opportunities that we have is exceeding any other specialties that is happening in the NHS at the moment. You can work on various things. We have many GB with a special interest in various parts. We have portfolio GB, GB educators, GB even working in the MDU, like in the indemnity organizations, GB working as a medical examiner, then helping coroners. Name it. Every single piece of the NHS as an organization still need GPs. And if you add that to actually the need to have more GPs because the need of our patients are increasing, it's give you some reassurance that there will still be an opportunity and a possibility for me to find something to do. So basically, I look for a GB career as a sky. and your limit is the sky. So do your best in your training. Try to sharpen your skills. Try to gain as much information as you can to help you as a GP from the secondary care or the primary care. Use all the resources available, including the study budgets, attending courses, but try to be intelligent to choose things that's helping you as a GP. And once you have all that in your hand, you will notice that your CV will start to get bigger and start to have more interesting parts. So by the end of your training, the sky will be the only limit for what you can achieve. And welcome to GB training and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. That was so interesting and enlightening. You touched on so many important topics there that are going to be very relevant to our IMG colleagues listening today. Can I invite the panelists who are still with us to pop on your cameras, because we are moving on to the Q&A section. We'll also be sharing for you the QR code for our feedback. While you're listening and asking any questions, please feel free to complete the feedback form for us so we can continue to improve what we do. Are there any burning questions anyone does have? And you can feel free to put them in the chat. We will answer them live for you. No question is a silly question. Everything is new and exciting, and we'll try our best with all the different perspectives to answer those. The other things I thought I would mention while we are wrapping up is that there will soon be a survey that is going live for all GP registrars on 14 Fish. Once you have access to that portfolio, that survey will be live on there. That survey has been initially designed to help gather information about IMG perspectives and challenges and support that's received. It'll be open for 6 weeks, and in that time we'd be really grateful to know what kind of experiences you're having, so we can help to support you guys in your long-term GP training. So just a heads up, you will be seeing that survey link coming live on your 14 Fish portfolio over the next couple of weeks and into the September time. Someone had asked a question about CPD, and I think there's been an answer to that already. So there wouldn't be a certificate for today, but you can access the webinar, and you can also do a reflection on this on your portfolio if you like, about the things that you've learned, and just to get used to what reflections are in the portfolio, and maybe just to consolidate your thoughts to come back to that information next time as well. We have some more questions. So, this is a good question. So, what is the pathway to become a GP with special interest? So, is anyone of our panel able to give some insight into this?
I'm happy to. So, GP with a special interest generally, I usually explain it like that. So, you have to be a GP and then develop your special interest. So, while you are in training, you will be passing through different rotations, and you can start to think, what special interest I would like to have. So, for example, you may have a special interest in dermatology. There are colleagues who have a special interest in minor procedure. There are joint injection, and there are even many others. The main idea is, once you start to know, yes, this is the thing that I like the most, you can start to tailor the courses or try to gain more information during your training to have more knowledge and more skills in that part. And once you finish your GB training, you can even have other things, like, for example, diplomas. There are different types of diplomas, like the family medicine ones that help in dealing with coil insertion, ring insertion. There are many others. So the special interests are very wide opportunities, it depending on what you would like. What you would like, if you choose something, will that be suitable to be done in primary care? So yes, a minor procedure will be done in primary care. This can be a special interest. But having a cesarean sections or doing a major surgery will not be done in primary care, so it's not a special interest. Once you know what you want to do, you start to gain skills in that. And more important, to finish your training. So once you get your CCT, you gather all these skills, start to search if there is any even supportive diplomas available. You gather this, and there are support from the faculty board across the UK from different, it's a little bit different from a place to others, but most of the faculty boards are happy to support and to guide you. And then congratulations, you are a GB with a special interest. It's not a complex way as you may think. It is just first be a GB, think what you would like to do, and gather the information needed.
Thank you for that, Mustafa. And we've shared a couple of links in the chat. So one of the things that can help is there are some pathways for a GP with extended role, which is basically similar to GP with special interests. It's kind of a bit more of a formalized process for certain extended roles where you should have certain experiences or certain courses or exposures for that area. And the RCGP has put those frameworks together for those areas. But this is not the only things you can have a special interest in. The GP with special interest is much more broad, as Mustafa said. It is pretty much anything that you have a keen interest in, but these have a little bit more of structure and framework around it. And there are also the special interest groups, which Sophie has shared in the chat as well, where you can join the, I suppose, community of interest, so that there will be other people with those similar interests who might have done certain qualifications, certain courses, or certain things that you would also like to do, and that's one way. But special interests, clinical interests, are not the only way to have a portfolio career. Kamran, I can see you've joined us back as well. Can you maybe add to us about some of your portfolio that's non-clinical, and how people might want to be a GP into that area?
Thanks, Amna. I think a lot of people, when they start GP training, they are really worried about becoming a GP with special interests. But I just want to highlight the fact that being a GP in itself can be very, very rewarding and also satisfying sometimes. So yes, by all means, do look into special interest, and you can have not just clinical special interest. There are things like leadership, governance, and education that you can look into. So for example, I do some work for ICSs now, which is Integrated Care System, where I'm looking at what the policies and initiatives and all that, where the ICS or Integrated Care Systems going to focus on. And that can also be kind of a special interest. And equally in education, like, as a fellow TPD, but in a different deanery. So, there is roles in education, like starting all the way from being a GP trainer, then going, working for your local university as a clinical tutor, or you could go into, once you have got enough experience and you're doing well, you can look at becoming TPD, or like an education lead for the college, which was a previous role that I had, and now I'm on the faculty. So there are opportunities. So don't just think about developing a clinical special interest. Sometimes, in order to diversify your portfolio, you can look at other things. But a lot of time, it's opportunity presenting itself and embracing it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kamran. We also have a question on here about the GP curriculum, that it is so vast. So while in your hospital rotation, how much should you be acquiring? And will this be required in GP land or not? How do you separate what is useful, what is not useful, and is there any mandatory checklist of skills? So if I pass on to Iman as our GP registrar rep, please.
Again, amazing talks today. So I really hope that everyone's left abundant with all these resources in their minds, probably got a little notebook out with all these links, hopefully. Essentially, hospital placements. I always tell people, when you go to a hospital placement, always think to your mind, how does this relate to my to primary care? How can I improve that? Every discharge letter you write, think about, do I want to write GP to kindly do anything? I don't know if anyone's heard the GP to kindly song, but maybe I'll find you a link for that as well. But ultimately, you need to try and think, okay, maybe I should try and get exposure from a clinical setting. So in the clinics rather than maybe in surgery. I think hospital placements have a lot to offer, but sometimes it does require you to just be a little bit proactive in trying to seek those opportunities. And sometimes you can just say, you know what, I would really like if I could maybe stay in your 2-week wait clinic just so I can understand what sort of things I should refer to. I know when I was on my ENT placement, dizziness clinic was really helpful for me because I was like, the amount of dizziness that you see in primary care, and I'm always like, should I not be doing anything different? It's just thinking about using your hospital rotations, but putting a primary care lens on it and thinking, if I was a GP, what would I come across? What would I think about seeing? Because it is vast. You're so right. And the beauty of general practice is that it's so vast. No one day is the same. And I really love that about general practice, but it can feel overwhelming initially. So pace yourself, know that you don't have to know everything, but know that trying to get little hints and tips from these clinics using your hospital rotations to benefit you are hugely beneficial, is what I would say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering that question. Did anyone else in the panel want to add anything to that at all?
I just wanted to quickly mention the super condensed guides, which were updated a short while ago. So when you go into hospital placement, look at that for that particular placement, and that gives you a very good idea what the college expects you to know, and that should be part of what you talk about in your placement planning meetings when you go in and say, "This is the curriculum guide." Most CSs in the hospital who have done who've had GP trainees for a while will have it, and they will go through that and set that for you. I have posted a link in that questions chat, but I hope, I do encourage you to use that. And that is very different from the huge curriculum that is super condensed, focused for that area.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yep, I think three of us have shared that link. So yes, please access that from the chat or the Q&A so you can see that in a bit more structured way. Another question we have is, as an ST1, in which context are we supposed to contact or escalate anything to our TPD, our primary point of contact in hospital rotation or GP land while in training? So how do you know who to contact? It's a really good question, so I'll open it out to all the panelists because everyone will have different thoughts on this and different examples.
I'll make a start at least. I think for me, we actually, in our inductions locally, we tried creating a little part of the induction was about self-advocacy and how it can feel just like Mustafa was mentioning, it can feel like the road is such a long pathway and you never walk alone in that path. There is always points of call, little service stations that you can stop at throughout the entire road and the entire journey. And it is important to make sure that you're getting your need or whatever question you might have addressed in the most appropriate way. I think ultimately it comes down to what the question that you're wanting and seeking is, to figure out which point of call you're needing. Sometimes it can be a simple thing of like, oh, it's a portfolio issue. Could I ask maybe one of my colleagues who might know, oh, do I need to click this button or do I press this button? Or how do I do my reflection or how do I make sure it's saved? If it's small queries like that, you might be able to have peer-to-peer support, which can be really beneficial. And in our local patch, I find that can address a lot of issues just in itself. If you find that there's a specific issue regarding your own GP placement or your specific placement, if you're in hospital even, it can be really useful to figure out or gather some information initially and then think about addressing things with your clinical supervisor. Let's say, the route is not working for you or you're struggling with certain placements or it's affecting your performance. I think addressing things with your clinical supervisor is a really good point of call there. If you feel like it's a wider based issue, let's say it's based on your whole scheme's teaching or something from that like more regional basis, if that makes sense, then I start thinking about your TPDs and getting their involvement. Because sometimes it might be that there are reasons for certain things which are a bit difficult. It could even be useful for you to discuss it with your educational supervisor or your clinical supervisor because they may be able to signpost you to things as well. So it really does depend on what question and who you should be asking certain things to. And half the time, if you just ask, I really believe no question is a stupid question because genuinely, if you're thinking off of it, a million other people are thinking off of it too. So ask it because you're helping not only yourself, but so many others after you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Iman. I think Mustafa, you had unmuted. Would you add something there?
To be honest, Iman said everything I wanted to say. So I will start from her last bit. So the most important thing is to ask, is to seek help. Don't shy from asking anyone, but yes, be logic in what you will ask and start to put it in steps. So I totally agree with Iman that even when I was a registrar, asking my colleagues help a lot because we are at the same boat, we have the same things together. So many things like how I insert this in the 14 fish, how I have this, like I'm working in ops and gynae, but I don't know how to do this shift here. Is it right to do this or do that? If you ask your colleagues, they may know a lot more than anybody higher up. Your clinical supervisor, while you are in the hospital, are your next contact step. And you can ask the clinical supervisor if there is any trouble in your rota or any trouble in the rotations or certain things that you need to learn, as you mentioned, Iman and Amina before. So if there is specific thing in these rotations, for example, the dizziness clinic, as Iman mentioned, that I would like to attend it more, but how can I do that? You can go to clinical supervisor and say, look, I think I need to attend more of a dizziness clinic. Could you help me with that? After the clinical supervisor, educational supervisor, and the educational supervisor, if couldn't solve a problem, will already escalate to the TBD. So basically, try to get your question answered. Don't shy from any answer, as Iman, from any question, as Iman mentioned. There is no 30 questions, and no questions show any weakness. Every question is a point for an improvement. So even if you couldn't get your answer by contacting the TBD, don't hesitate to contact the associate dean. So try to get an answer for your question. Don't shy from that, but be logic, start in steps, and I assure you there will be a support and there will be someone who knows the answer to your question.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that, Mustafa. Yes, to be honest, if you ask anyone if they're not the right person, they will tell you where the right person is. So just ask whoever you feel comfortable and confident in asking, and one way or another, they will get you to where you need to go. Signe, can I bring you in for this one on really how do we get exposure for topics that we don't have a rotation in? So if someone has not got pediatric exposure or dermatology, how can they get access to that? And knowing that you also do out of hours, what if someone would like to do more of that? So how can they arrange that?
I think, like Iman and Mustafa have shared, if you share that you have interest in that, they can put you into contact with people who are in those departments. For example, we had someone who came in to speak to us about palliative care during my GP training, which wasn't a placement that I had, but they were happy for people to come in and sit with them in clinic and share their contact information that way. In terms of out of hours, it was part of our GP training in Kent, Surrey, and Sussex. We had to do a minimum of 72 hours. This was cut back after COVID, but it was in our local out of hours department. And they did come and speak with us during training to say, following training, they did offer salaried posts to GPs in the area with the same clinical supervisor and program director from that. So I think it does depend on where you are, but every area would have out of hours, and every department has someone who's willing to take on people and train them, and that would be dermatology, palliative care, ENT. I think the rest of them would be hospital based, so you could go to them either through your TBD or directly if you have their contacts. But if you show up with enthusiasm, respect, being hardworking, I don't see that there would be really barriers for you there.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Signe. I'm going to bring in Kamran as a TBD. You might have some more thoughts on that.
I thought I'll link in the two questions that were asked and answer both of them at the same time. So I think they both stem from what a lot of our registrars ask or worry about when they're starting training. One is, how will they get experience in certain areas when they don't have placements? And the other is, how do they switch into the GP consultation and skills thing? And the answer to both of those is, believe it or not, that's the entire point of the training. Within these 3 years, we will help to upskill you to that level. And while there are opportunities to learn from hospital medicine, hospital specialist, believe it or not, a lot of what you need to learn comes from within general practice. So when you're seeing your patients within general practice, the stuff that you need to know about that particular area within general practice is covered 99.999%. Now, some of you might want to develop more of that as a special interest, like, for example, Signe mentioned palliative care. Someone might want to become a palliative care specialist within general practice, and yes, then there'll be an opportunity to go and learn from them. But believe it or not, most of what you need to know by the end of your ST3, if you work with your ES, you will cover it within that. And the skills that you need for consultation, and I think the biggest fear people have is consulting within 10 minutes and seeing multiple different types of pathologies within a day, that most of our registrars, if not all, will have that ability to do it by the end of their ST3. So don't worry, as long as you just work with your ESs, you'll get there.
Thank you for that, Kamran. And Iman, do you have something to add as well?
Amazing points by both of them, and I 100% agree with everything that they've said. Having a close contact with your educational supervisor is essential in trying to pick up those needs that you may not necessarily know. And similarly, trying to figure out and reach out to placements is really useful. Two things I wanted to mention was one, the RCGP has amazing e-learning resources, which I have found really beneficial in my revision, my learning, trying to make sure that I was covering areas that I'm not very good at, for example. So there's things which are called one-day essential webinars, which I'm amazed at how many GP registrars love them as much as I do, because I feel so geeky liking things like this, to be honest with you. But it's a really good, fun one day. You can use your study leave towards it as well. It's a free webinar, and you can have it on those specific areas that you may want to focus on. So there's like they're on lots of different topics. So there's one on ENT, there was one on ophthalmology, which was really good. Some on lifestyle-based medicines. But look out for when there are those one-day essentials, because they can be really beneficial in finding those pockets of learning that you might not necessarily have exposure to and trying to explore those a little bit. I again found some of the e-learning tools really helpful. So there's things like podcasts online. There's also little toolkits which can be really helpful. Sometimes you'll get like a faculty newsletter, and there's certain courses, events, things happening as well. And it can really be helpful if you just attend one. Maybe one isn't good, but try another one, because different ones will have different information that you may not have necessarily exposed yourself to otherwise, is one thing I wanted to mention. So really look out for those opportunities. Look on the courses and events on the RCGP page, because they can be really helpful. An annual conference and the virtual the Vision for the Future of General Practice conference, which usually happens each year around March time. So it's already happened for this year, but if you think about for next year, they are really useful sources of trying to gather some of those information as well. So utilize your study leave is what I would definitely recommend. That was my main point.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So we have another question, and this is a little bit more niche because it's for a ACF or Academic Clinical Fellow GP trainee who started from August, and they're a little bit unsure on what they should be included in and what not to be included in, and struggling to get an answer to that. I wish Molly was here because she's also in the same boat, but she's just gone now. But from my understanding, and the panel can feel free to correct me, is that you would be included the same as the other GP registrars. You would still be having the same teaching. It's just that your time is split. So you will be doing some of your working week in is a clinical, and then some of your week in your academic post. And I think the exact ratio, I'm not sure what that might be, but you would still be doing your rotation, your clinical rotation, as is on your portfolio, how you've been assigned. You'd still be going to your teaching, your VTS teaching, and same as everybody else. So you wouldn't be excluded from the things that everyone else is doing. It's almost similar to if someone is less than full-time training, except you are less than full-time clinical, but you are then doing your remaining days as academic. Does that make sense? So if you speak to your admin, you basically will be along in the same program, and you'll receive information about your academic side, usually separately to that. But does anyone else have anything they might be able to add onto that?
No, I think that's pretty much it. The only thing is that, yes, initially when you're starting off, you're not sure. but when you start and you sign into your portfolio, it'll break down exactly what you're doing on that training map. So make sure you look at that. It'll tell you where you're going, where you will be. And most people have a big educational chunk in the last 2 years because that's when the most of the education time comes in. So you'll have time to do your academic work at that time. You'll be paid for that, and that's the advantage of being an academic clinical fellow. And if I wouldn't panic. I wouldn't worry. On first, on Wednesday when you start, just go in, do your induction, and just start as you would normally.
Yes, thank you for that. I know someone has asked, what is a academic clinical fellow? Iman, I think you put here that you would answer that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you've already given a pretty good explanation anyway, to be honest with you, but GP training is really amazing in the sense that you can have different sort of training pathways, if that makes sense, in the way you do things. And it's a shame that Molly isn't here because she herself is an academic clinical fellow. And so she did an ST 1 year, which was her normal sort of hospital rotation, and then she had a GP rotation. And then in her ST 2 year, she's having this academic clinical rotation, if that makes sense. And basically, from what I've understood from her, which is similar to, again, what Amna has mentioned already, is that you have a split variation within your week. So it's almost as if you're spending some time within the week to do some academic clinical based things. So within her sort of field, she's doing things regarding education and training and continuity of care and trying to work on how things we can improve regarding all of that. So if you do have a passion for something, think about whether or not that's something that could be utilized in a similar means. And Molly's got an amazing academic brain, so I would definitely try and reach out to her or through the GP Registrar's email address as well if you have a specific query, because it might be that she'd be able to address things back to you from that email address. But ultimately, you do still have that clinical component within it as well, which can be really helpful. So that way you're still keeping at base with your normal GP practice and then having your academic things alongside. So look into opportunities if you are interested in something along those lines. It might be something that you're wanting to do. It can feel, and I felt for the person who's asked this question, because it does seem as if their support teams are a bit unsure as to how to support them. So I do think reaching out to the NHS Deanery and their teams is important. I think, as Kamran had mentioned as well, when you reach induction, somehow life has a magical way of things slotting sometimes into place when you reach induction. And it might just be that when you come to your induction, there's a bit more clarity in some of that aspect of how your specific scheme and how your specific rotation is going to be working out. So it might be that we specifically may not have specific questions or answers to your specific problem, but know that there will be people who you can reach out to. And if things aren't ironed out by the beginning, then at least you know who you can contact from there. I hope that helps.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. And also congratulations for the person who is doing that ACF program, because it is a very competitive post that you apply to before GP training. So some people were asking, can you enter into that later? It's basically you apply when you apply for GP training. So it's highly competitive, very few posts in the country. So well done for achieving that. I can see some hand up from the panelists. So Signe, would you have anything to add there?
I was just going to add, for people who are asking about joining as an academic clinical fellow, there are fellowships post CCT. So for example, I did a fellowship in simulation in clinical education, and there's also educational fellowships with your local universities. So if you haven't been able to do that during your time in training, you still have a long career in general practice where you can still look into special interests or fellowships or portfolio roles. There's a lot of time to look into those things too.
Thank you for that. And Kamran, I think you unmuted there. Were you going to add something for us?
I was just going to say that can I please plead with everyone to be just a bit patient with the admin team, because I don't know, for those of you who are starting new, there's been a massive cut in admin last few years. So you might have an admin team of 6 or 8 people looking after somewhere between 3,000 trainees. So as much as we all want answers and we all want them now, everyone's working really hard, and sometimes just just to keep that in mind, that people will get back to you as soon as they can. They are some amazingly efficient people who are dealing with this, but just, don't think that they've ignored you or they're incompetent. They are really, really worked. And it's a busy time right now. So please, I ask for a little bit of patience on their behalf.
Absolutely. So just to wrap up, because we are coming into the last few minutes of the session, thank you everyone for coming to our webinar. Please do scan the QR code and complete our feedback form so we can learn from today and improve for next time and for your future colleagues who will be coming up behind you. A reminder that the session has been recorded and we will be uploading it to the RCGP YouTube channel within a couple of weeks' time, so do find us on there. You can actually also find the previous year ones as well if there was anything of interest you'd like to get from those. And let us know how you found that. You can also comment on there as well. Oh, suddenly there's more questions. And a lot of thank yous. So thank you everyone for your thank yous and for being so engaged and curious throughout the day. It's made it really more helpful for us as well to see what kind of questions you guys have, and I can see we're answering some of those in the chat as well. So from now we will bring the session to a close. Thank you everyone again for your time, and thank you to our panelists. Thank you for Giles and to Sophie and Amy in the back who have been helping behind the scenes to make today really smooth for us. Everyone have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon. Thank you and goodbye.